Hello, and welcome to the Doof Book Club, our monthly live stream discussion of a book chosen by you, our listeners. My name is Matt Freeman, and this is my cavalier, Scott Daly.
very, very good intro joke, Matt. But we all know I'm the necromancer and you're the cavalier.
Is that so?
Yeah, man. Come on.
Oh,
Necromancer.
oh,
Come on.
okay.
I do bones. I
Okay.
do bones.
That does make sense. You do bones.
Hello, everyone, and welcome, welcome, welcome. I hope you're having a wonderful Friday evening. I'm sure we know a lot of you folks in chat. I see a couple people talking already. But if you're joining us here for the very first time, welcome. We are Doof Media, and we make podcasts all about the stories we love. We also do this here monthly book club every month. Matt, will you explain what a book club is?
Each month, Scott and I select 5 books from a pool submitted to us by our wonderful Doof community. We put up a poll for all of the supporters on Patreon at patreon.com/doofmedia, and we let the patrons vote on which they'd like us to talk about. The book with the most votes wins, and then we all read it.
That is right. And then we meet here on the last Friday of the month, or the first when it's the first day. And then we spend a couple of hours talking about the book. We pull some slides of some interesting moments. And Matt and I just lead a discussion with you folks here in chat. Matt, what discussion are we leading about what book this month?
This month we are discussing Gideon the Ninth by Tamsyn Muir.
Oh.
And the summary is as follows. The Emperor needs necromancers. The ninth necromancer needs a swordswoman. Gideon has a sword, some dirty magazines, and no more time for undead bullshit. Brought up by unfriendly, ossifying nuns, ancient retainers, and countless skeletons, Gideon is ready to obtain a life of servitude and an afterlife as a reanimated corpse. Abandon a life of servitude. Misread that. She packs up her sword, her shoes, and her dirty magazines and prepares to launch her daring escape, but her childhood nemesis won't set her free without a service. Harrowhark Nonagesimus, Reverend Daughter of the Ninth House and Bone Witch Extraordinaire, has been summoned into action. The Emperor has invited the heirs of each of his loyal houses to a deadly trial of wits and skill. If Harrowhark succeeds, she will become an immortal, all-powerful servant of the resurrection. But no necromancer can ascend without their cavalier. Without Gideon's sword, Harrow will fail, and the Ninth House will die. Of course, some things are better left dead.
Oh, this really plays up the dirty magazines thing, which is not relevant to the plot at all, but I think
really
is a really good way of setting the tone of what type of book this is.
Yeah.
We forgot to say hello to everyone. We just kind of jumped into things. So hello, I see John, I see Miss Evil Doom, I see Peter and Kyle and Tringard, and the Double Davids are here. Quantum, hello. Kyrgyzstan, hello. Bipolaron, hello everyone. Brent, Dan here, who says they're new first time book clubber.
Great.
What's up,
Awesome.
Dan?
Yeah, welcome. Hi, Peter. Hi, Tringard. You didn't already say Tringard.
I did.
Damn it.
You fucked up.
Well, double. I'm welcoming Tringard again.
Let's start the show over again. All right, so Gideon the Ninth. Let's talk about this book, and we're going to do the part of the show now where we give our first impressions, our overall impressions about this book before we dive deep into it. And while we are doing that, we want you folks to do the same in chat. So while Matt is talking about how much he loved or hated this book, tell us how much you loved or hated this book. Is this the first time you read it? Did you read it again? Or did you just know you read it in the past and decided to come hang out and talk about it? Matt, go.
I really, really enjoyed this book. This is very fun. It was like a wonderful melange of all of the things that I love in stories, where it's got like a murder mystery in there. It's got like a creepy old house where there's just a separate mystery. So there's a concurrent murder mystery, but also separate weird mystery involving secret keys and puzzles and like sort of I don't want to make the Da Vinci Code comparison, but it's like I think Indiana Jones is maybe better.
Meanest thing you've ever said to this book.
No, it's more just like it's a mystery that involves trying to figure things out, and multiple characters and fun types of relationships and novel angles of conflict and like some things I picked up and I got ahead of time so I could feel happy about it, but then other things I definitely didn't. So that kept it, mysterious and engaging as we went along. And just a very, very fun, very well written in in just a sentence on the sentence level, on the level of prose. Great character. I mean, just a great book. Really, really fun book. I really enjoyed it. What did you think about it, Scott?
I think I'm a little colder on this book than you. I want to preface this whole thing with I think I did a bad job reading this book. I was a bad reader. I think I had a lot of trouble connecting to this book in the first 100 pages, and I think that made me miss a lot of the things the book was doing. And I didn't even fully realize that until I was going through and looking at the pages I marked for slides as I was going, and realizing how little those pages I marked for slides as I was going had to do with anything the book was doing, because I was just kind of struggling to get my head around what this book was, what this world was, what was going on here. And I really feel like this is the type of book that on a reread I would totally fall in love with. And I wish I had time before the show to reread it, because I feel like I would have just had a much clearer picture of everything. And that would have allowed me to just enjoy it on the levels it's doing. But on this read, I just felt like the book was always like, I was always just like, it was just out of hand's reach for me a lot of times, where I was just like, I was just a little bit away from grasping it. And by the end, by the final act of the book, or I guess the final act is just a tiny piece, but by the last fourth of the book, I'd say, when the things are starting to be revealed and like the cloak of mystery is kind of removed over the book, and I understand who the characters were and what type of book this is, finally, I really got in the zone with it and started enjoying it. But the first couple 100 pages were tough for me, for sure.
Sure, yeah. I don't know how many pages it was exactly for me, but it's such an interesting tone where it took me a long time to settle into what feeling of story this was going to be. Because for a minute I was like, is this like a Terry Pratchett type of story where we've got we've got like almost like just like a lot of silliness, and like you're not supposed to take the premise too seriously. And then it was like, no, the world building is actually solid, and you're supposed to take it somewhat seriously, but also your main character is this woman who's lived on this like sepulcher world for her entire life, and yet uses words like douchebag, which so there's like this clash of expectations. But like once you get over that, then it's just kind of delightful. Like I think for me, the thing that I walked away from this book having sort of learned is like I will overlook a large amount of weirdness if you're just giving me a good time, if I'm having fun.
Sure.
Because like certain things, like the way Gideon speaks, for example, is one thing where like if I wanted to nitpick, I could be like, it's not realistic she would speak that way based on her upbringing. And it's like, I don't care at all. I was just having fun. And there's a few other things where it's like necromancy, space, what? Huh? and then I'm just like, yeah, whatever. This is a cool idea. It doesn't need to make sense. It's never explained. I don't care. It doesn't matter. It's awesome. It's fun.
Yeah. I think part of the reason, I think, especially in the early going, that I had such trouble, there's this combination of Harrow is intentionally leaving Gideon out of the larger picture of what's going, and also Gideon doesn't care. And so those two things in combination mean, at least in the first quarter of the book or so, like the what's actually going on and like the main plot is kind of like put in the background because Gideon doesn't care about it and or doesn't know about it. And like that's really clever, and I totally think that in a reread you'd be able to see all those things. But in this one it's just like Gideon doesn't care yet. And so the text of the book doesn't necessarily care yet.
Yeah. Well,
but
go ahead.
No, I agree with her dialogue and the way Gideon talks and the fear with that kind of meme heavy internet speak. I read a book, the Lindsay Ellis's book that came out last year. Lindsay Ellis is a YouTuber that I like her videos a whole lot, and I read her book last year and I didn't really enjoy it. And a lot of reason I didn't enjoy it is because it was written in like the tone of voice of a YouTuber, like even not just the dialogue, but just like how the narrative of the book was. It just sounded like what you would imagine a YouTuber writing a book would sound like, and
Uh-huh.
I just wasn't into it, and so I was worried because I had heard about this book and the way Gideon talks, and so I was worried that kind of meme heavy dialogue was just going to completely rip me out of the book, and they're delighted to say that it doesn't. I think there's so much more going on with this book than just the way Gideon talks, to the point where I was loving the writing. So
Mhm. Yeah, to me that was just kind of some spice to make it fun, and maybe make it a little bit more engaging in some of the periods where otherwise it might be like um, a drag to get through some particular piece of exposition or what have you.
we need to scroll back up because we've been talking for a while, and everyone else is saying what they loved about this book. So Miss Evil Doom says that this is their favorite book. They've read it 7 times. Man, that's, I don't know. Matt, have you ever read a book 7 times? I'm trying to think of what book I've read the
I don't know
most
about
times.
7. I've definitely read books more than, three or 4 times,
Yeah, I
but
have
probably
too.
not 7. That's cool. Peter says that he's read it 4 times. Okay, so I mean, I want to reread it. It's one of those books where I definitely feel like I missed a lot. I mean, one of the things, speaking of missing things, is it was only after reading it that I saw people talking about like all these biblical references and stuff, and I was like, oh, okay, like I got some of these things, or some of them were like overt, and then some of them I just recognized, but apparently I missed a lot of stuff also, which makes me want to go back and see
Yeah,
how deep that went exactly.
we're going to talk about some of that, but by the nature of the format of the show, the only parts of it I'm going to highlight are the parts that I got,
Mhm.
which is not much. But yeah, this is a book chock full of references, both to pop culture now and also to literature, for
Mhm.
sure. Um, Kyrgyzstan says that I lost it. I just had it and I lost it. Kyrgyzstan said that this was their first time reading it. They read it for the book club. Did you like it, Kirk? I didn't see that. Kyle S said they super dug it. Super dug. John, first time reading it, really loved it. Tringard said it was a uh, fun first read. Didn't feel like they were given what I was need to solve anything, but just enjoy the ride. Yeah, I definitely feel that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I like immediately knew that a certain character was pretending to be as sick, whatever. We'll get there.
So you
But
guessed the Dulcinea.
well, I didn't guess that she was secretly the lictor. I
Okay.
just guessed that she was only pretending to be as sick as she seemed to be. Um,
I did notice when I was going through pulling slides how often Gideon references her Dulcinea's Cavalier as like in the least human person. Like she just
yeah,
describes him as like a big
yeah,
walking. Like it's just so funny in
right.
retrospect.
Well, so that's these are, I'm just gonna get it out of the way now. Like the two things that I actually did get were like I got that Dulcinea something was off about Dulcinea, and then also I like immediately just thought her Cavalier was probably a reanimated corpse because it's a book about necromancers, and he never speaks and he lumbers around like Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah.
that's it though. I didn't get anything else.
I do think it's interesting, and we'll get into the actual details here in a minute. But I do think it's interesting. Like this is a book with a very very long cast of characters, which is good because I mean these kind of in the creepy haunted house murder mystery type stories with a long cast of characters as part of the fun of it. Um, they have very complicated names, and they all have first names and last names, and the houses they're part of. And I kid you not, man, it took me 200 pages into the book before I realized that the last names of all the members, the necromancers, were their
Uh-huh.
house note letter. Like it
Uh-huh.
seriously too, and I think it wasn't until we saw one of the last names of one of the guys of the 8th house like 200 pages in, and I was like, wait, Oct. I was like,
Yeah.
huh, that's funny. And then I went and looked at the beginning of the physical book, which I know you didn't read. There's a dramatis personae because this is like built to kind of be play like where it has
Uh-huh.
acts. And then I looked at it and I was like, oh wait a minute, and I felt so stupid.
Yeah, I don't know how many pages it took because I was in the audiobook, but it took me a while. It took me, I think what actually happened, basically like you, is somebody's name was, either Sextus or Octakizaron, and I was like, that's fun. Wait, wait.
Yeah,
Oh.
but I do think like this is the type of thing that I think and before I say this, I enjoyed this book, but the type of thing that I think works better in a visual medium because like you don't have to necessarily remember all the characters' names and titles and first names, last names, title, all these things, which house they belong to, what is the characterization of that house. You can just see them and know. So that makes it a little clearer, because I think that was part of my general feeling of being at arm's length with this book a lot of times, is because that, especially at the beginning, that stuff was very difficult to juggle, and then by the end of it you've got it down and you feel like I think that's one thing Tamsyn Muir does really really well, is over the course of the book characterize them, but definitely at the beginning it's super overwhelming.
It's also helpful that we kill people off gradually.
Yeah,
so
we got to
there's
get
just
rid of
less
them.
of them.
Yeah. Because I don't have to keep Magnus in my brain anymore. Because I was so confused with the fifth house and the fourth house, because I guess in my head I decided that the fourth house children were the children of the fifth house people, and that really confused me, because I was like, wait, that doesn't make any sense, and I confused myself a lot reading this book.
This is one thing where I definitely would benefit from a reread. There's all this like inter-house politics where different houses hate each other and have alliances, and all I really picked up from that is like I'm pretty sure the 8th hates the 9th, and beyond that I don't remember.
Well, a lot of them hate the 9th, which we learn. That's one thing that I do think is good with the way Gideon talks. Is it because it's not that none of the other characters talk in that kind of modern sounding dialogue, but she does it the most, and it sets her apart. It makes her feel different from everyone else. And one of the things that I think this book is trying to go for a lot is how outside everything she feels for the majority of the book.
Yeah. John mentions that the reason she speaks differently, she speaks like the characters in her magazines.
Yeah, which makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is her entire personality was kind of built from, because I mean she lives such a sheltered, terrible life.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Dan just points out how it can be off-putting when people use like modern references in books like this, but that this one pulled it off really well.
I agree. Yeah.
Avery mentions how fun it is that Harrow's constantly trying to explain like necromancy magic to Gideon, and Gideon just does not give a damn at all.
Yeah, it's so funny, because at the back of the book, I don't know if this was in the audiobook, but the back of the book there's like a glossary and like a character thing and like all this stuff that like Gideon would never know, because she doesn't get like, but there's like here's a definition of necromancer and a definition of thallergy and thanergy. It's like all this stuff that you think the book kind of does, but it's not the driving force of it, because Gideon doesn't care.
Yeah. The magic is all just kind of it's very fun actually, but it's sort of just commonsensical once you see what's happening. You're like, oh, okay, yeah. These people drain life. These people do bones, etc.
We do bones.
That's right.
It's such a fun book. When it's really clicking, it's such a fun book.
Great.
It is absolutely, like I've said multiple times, I think I need a reread. It's one of those ones that I feel like I will probably get around to actually doing that, which I don't always say about these books.
Yeah,
even the ones I really like.
Doing it as well.
Yeah. Everyone's saying F in chat for the 4th and 5th.
Yeah, the 4th and 5th. Yeah. All right.
Well, let's do it. Let's get into it, and let's begin where we always begin, which is the very first words of the first page of the book.
Right. In the myriadic year of our Lord, the 10,000th year of the King of the Undying, the kindly Prince of Death, Gideon Nav packed her sword, her shoes, and her dirty magazines, and she escaped from the house of the 9th. She didn't run. Gideon never ran unless she had to. In the absolute darkness before dawn, she brushed her teeth without concern and splashed her face with water, and even went so far as to sweep the dust off the floor of her cell. She shook out her big black church robe and hung it from the hook. Having done this every day for over a decade, she no longer needed light to do it by. This late in the equinox, no light would make it here for months. In any case, you could tell the season by how hard the heating vents were creaking. She dressed herself from head to toe in polymer and synthetic weave. She combed her hair. Then Gideon whistled through her teeth as she unlocked her security cuff and arranged it and its stolen key considerately on her pillow, like a chocolate in a fancy hotel. Leaving her cell and swinging her pack over one shoulder, She took the time to walk down 5 flights of her mother's nameless catacomb, to her mother's nameless catacomb niche. This was pure sentiment, as her mother hadn't been there since Gideon was little and would never go back in it now. Then came the long hike up 22 flights the back way, not one light relieving the greasy dark, heading to the split-off shaft and the pit where her ride would arrive. The shuttle was due in 2 hours. Out here, you had an unimpeded view of up to a pocket of night sky. It was soupy white where the atmosphere was pumped the thickest, and thin and navy where it wasn't. The bright bead of Dominicus winked benignly down from the mouth of a long vertical tunnel. In the dark, she made an opening amble of the field's perimeter, and she pressed her hands up hard against the cold and oily rock of the cave walls. Once this was done, she spent a long time methodically kicking apart every single innocuous drift and hummock of dirt and rock that had been left on the worn floor of the landing field. She dug the shabby steel toe of her boot into the hard-packed floor, but satisfied with the sheer improbability of anyone digging through it, left it alone. Not an inch of the huge empty space did Gideon leave unchecked, and as the generator lights grumbled to half-hearted life, he checked it twice by sight. She climbed up the wire-meshed frames of the floodlights and checked them too, blinded by the glare, feeling blindly behind the metal housing, grimly comforted by what she didn't find.
Can't believe the poor Ninth lives on Pluto. So cold and dark.
Planet really sucks.
Yeah.
So is it literally supposed to be Earth's solar system, or is it another solar system?
I have no idea. I was making a joke. There just happens to be 9 houses and 9 planets, and
it almost might as well be Pluto because it sucks so bad.
Yeah. And I mean, that line where like the atmosphere was pumped in, so they live in a shaft underground, right?
Yeah. Right. The idea I get is all the houses have their own planet. Some of the planets are much worse than others.
Yeah, this one sucks. Yeah.
And you also get the sense that like the whole population of this planet lives in this crappy little shaft, basically. I don't know if that's true or not, but it seems that way.
I think it is. I think it is. I mean, Pluto's pretty small.
Yeah. People are saying I'm pretty sure it's literally Pluto.
I'm glad I'm not the only one who thought that. I also literally I pulled the slide, I reread the slide, and it's the first time I'm reading the she dug the shabby steel toe boot into hard-packed floor, but satisfied with the sheer improbability of anyone digging through it, which of course, as we'll see in the very next slide, somebody did that.
Somebody meticulously did that all night long. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, the whole Pluto thing fits with the idea of the 9th house not feeling right as well.
It makes it makes sense for these to just be the colonized planets of the solar system, because we don't know anything. I actually love this sort of thing, how we just have these vague hints that like the Emperor and his cohorts and his lictors are off fighting like untold horrors out there in the dark, but we like have no idea what that is.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know if it's aliens, we don't know if it's other humans, or I missed it if we do know that.
We don't really know. That's the interesting thing about the world building that I actually appreciate, that like so much of the stuff is intentionally undefined, and once you get your head around the fact that it's not defined and either will come up later or doesn't matter, you're cool with it. But like when you're first starting reading the book, like this is like I'm reading this and I'm like scrambling for answers, and the book is not interested in giving me answers for a lot of this for a long time.
John says Canaan House is probably on Earth, actually.
Yeah, I have a slide where we describe what the building looks like, and it seems like we're potentially trying to do like a post collapse of civilization Earth.
Yeah, it makes sense because they were describing the sky as being this impossible like cerulean color, and I was like, you mean like Earth's sky?
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course the connection that Pluto means Hades, which is the god of death. Thank you, John. It's seeming pretty solid, actually.
Yeah, I love it. And before we move on, just the first sentence of this book is so good. Like this is like, you almost think if Tamsyn Muir had the idea to like have this sentence before the rest of the book, because it's like the perfect tone setting. This is a book where like there's these kind of grand, lofty traditions, and a lot of people that are incredible traditionalists and very strict and super serious. And then you have people like Gideon who are just Gideon. And so the contradiction and the shift in tone in the middle of the sentence is perfect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. That's one of the things that makes it a fun and evocative beginning. Is you have just this clash of elements where it's sci-fi. They live inside of a pressurized tube on a distant planet, but also there's a sense of humor. Okay, she has a sword. We've got a sword, and we've got sci-fi, and we've got an undying king, and we've got. Then there's a mystery of like she's digging around. What is she digging for? She's feeling blindly for something she's not finding. We don't know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
There's just so much fun packed in here.
Yeah. Speaking of which, let's move to the fight between Gideon and Harrowhawk. I love this part for how it establishes what this relationship is, which is the most important relationship of the entire book. The roar of the shuttle drowned out the clattering of bones and the blood in her ears as she was grabbed by dozens of hands. Harrowhawk's talent had always been in scale, in making fully realized constructs from as little as an arm bone or a pelvis, able to make an army of them from what anyone else would need for one. And in some far-off way, Gideon had always known that this would be how she went, gangbanged to death by skeletons. The melee melted away to admit a booted foot that knocked her down. The bone men held her to the earth as she reared up, spitting and bleeding, to find Harrow, tucked between her grinning minions, pensive, serene. Harrowhawk kicked Gideon in the face. For a couple of seconds, everything was red and black and white. Gideon's head lolled to the side, and she coughed out a tooth, choking, thrashing to rise. The boot pressed itself to her throat, then down and down and down, forcing her back into the hard grit floor. The shuttle's descent whipped up a storm of stinging dust, sending some of the skeletons flying. Harrow discarded them, and they rattled into still anatomical piles. "It's pathetic, Griddle," said the Lady of the Ninth. Bones were shredded from her minions now after the initial adrenaline rush, peeling off and falling inert to earth. An arm there, a jawbone here, as they wobbled out of shape. She pushed herself very hard. Radiating out from them was a circle of burst pockets in the hard ground, like tiny exploded mines. She stood among her holes with hot bloody face and trickling nosebleed, and indifferently wiped her face with her forearm. "It's pathetic," she repeated, slightly thick with blood. "I turn up the volume. I put on a show. You feel bad. You make it so easy. I got more hot and bothered digging all night." "You dug?" wheezed Gideon, rather muffled with grit and dust. "All night?" "Of course. The floor's hard as hell, and there's a lot to cover." "You insane creep," said Gideon. "Call it, Crux," ordered Harrowhawk. It was with poorly hidden glee that her marshal called out, "A fair fight. The foe is floored. A win for the Lady Nagasemius."
It's so fun. I love it.
Everyone's pointing out that I'm saying Harrowhawk, which apparently is not, and I'm looking right now, and I don't know how I did that in my head literally every single time.
That's funny. I wonder, that's just probably how your brain decided it was. But
yeah.
What's funny is, of course, the audiobook reader has a British accent, and so they say Harrowhawk, which, because they don't say ours, right? So those ours anyway.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, this is kind of our establishing point for the relationship of Gideon and Harrow, which is, as I said, the defining relationship of the book, the most important thing that's going on here. And I think it's a really fun way of establishing, right? Like, we have this fight between the two of them. I love everything leading up to the fight, too, where Gideon is, like, completely untrustworthy about the deal she's about to make, but it seems so safe anyway. Like, it's just a great little sequence from beginning to end, I thought, and that like establishes everything that's going on with them. Like, the idea that Harrow went to the effort of doing this just to fuck her over. Like, she didn't have to do it this way, but she wanted to give her just a little bit of feeling like it was actually going to work this time. It establishes how damaging and terrible this relationship is, and of course then we get to learn later in the book the why of this.
Yeah. You get the sense that there's this immense amount of subtext between these two characters, and you don't really understand like the nature of this world, because it seems like it's just this like monastery world, but then at the same time you're like, well, then like why is Gideon here? And what and it's funny because I didn't explicitly ask myself, why is there no one else their age, because it could have just been the case that there were other people their age and they just didn't happen to be in that place at that time. But part of you notices like there there's only two, you know, people who were less than like 50
Yeah.
seemingly anywhere. And that's unusual. So anyway, there's a lot. I'm not saying I noticed that like specifically, but there's a lot of stuff that makes you kind of like what is going on here exactly between these women, and the book takes a long time to explain it, but it's worth it.
Yeah. And of course, non. That's 9, by the way. I didn't know if you knew that, Matt. See,
Yeah.
because the house, it's in their last name. Did you know that?
I got around to it eventually. Yes. It was
Yeah, I love Bipolar, and points out that one of the things that Harrow likes to do is say, "I don't even remember you most of the time. I don't think about you most of the time, Gideon. You're convinced that I care about you more than you do." But then also does something like this. It's so transparent and obvious that like I really like this relationship. I think it's really, really good. And even as I said at the introduction, that a lot of this book I was just trying to grasp for, the one thing that I thought was always very clear was the relationship between these two women, and I could kind of see where it was going to go, right? I obviously didn't predict we killed 300 or 200 babies just to make you, but I there was going to be some reveal. I think I said to you about halfway through the book that like we're going to learn that Harrow's view of Gideon comes from something, and Gideon doesn't understand it quite right, which is
right.
It was not exactly how it turned out.
Yeah. Well, there's two things that are my favorite in this book. One of them is the ways in which Gideon fails to recognize that Harrow Hark is like doing things to be considerate. And the second is when Gideon fails to recognize that Gideon cares a lot about Harrow Hark.
Yeah.
Like for example, like I think my favorite, which was a moment that just made me laugh, when I think it's like the first time she goes into like the basement area, and she learns that Harrow Hark is in danger and is like wrapped in a sarcophagus or something, or like is like mummified herself with bones or something, and she like freaks out and like starts like she breaks the rule not to speak, and like it's very evident that she's like extremely worried and needs to take care of Harrow Hark.
Yeah.
And this is not something that she's able to ever admit to herself in normal circumstances.
I do think, and I'm not 100% sure, I do think when she sees her wrapped in bone and possibly dead, she runs over to her. And we just saw here in the first page, Gideon never ran unless she had to, right? And so like that's just a really good subtle way of showing exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Mike says, funnily enough, my default assumption for most characters is we killed 200 babies to make you. That's an interesting outlook, Mike. I wish you luck with that. Avery points out that they are very young. Gideon is 18 and Harrow is 17, and there are ways in which they definitely feel like children. See, when you get to our ages, that to me that just is children.
Yeah, they are children. Yeah, I guess that's true. I mean, yeah, they definitely feel young and lacking a lot of self-knowledge, and also just the fact that they were raised in this horrible planet where there was no one to talk to, and like Gideon's, rightly always complaining about the fact that the only people around to talk to were these ossifying nuns and Harrow Hark, who seems to hate her apparently.
I loved the word ossifying. I've never seen used as much as it was used in this book, and it's perfect. It's perfect.
Yeah, no, it was great. So there's one thing. So I really enjoyed the audiobook. I really enjoyed the audiobook reader. There's just one fun, like, I don't want to. Okay, so it was a great audiobook overall, great experience. There's one funny thing that kept happening where the voice that she chose to do for Harrow Hark was like, it's pathetic. I turn up the volume. I put on a show. You feel bad. And then she would still use that voice when the text said, Harrow Hark said in tones of the grave or something. And it's like, that's not tones of the grave. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I didn't imagine it like that. I don't know.
No, I mean, I don't think that was the proper call for Harrow Hark. I think because she's trying to come off as the ultimate prototypical ninth house Lion.
Yeah, man, you just like think about what life was like for Gideon, like knowing why everyone hates her. Like that's so sad. It's so sad. Ugh. Anyway, let's move on.
Let us. So here we have the Necro and the Cavalier arrive at the house of the first. They were on an enormous metal plated dock of what must have surely been the most impressive structure the first house had ever built. It might have been the most impressive structure anyone had ever built. Gideon didn't have a lot to go on. Rearing up before them was a palace, a fortress, of white and shining stone. It spread out on the surface of the water like an island. You couldn't see over it, and you could hardly see around it. It lapped back in terraces of what must have once been fabulous gardens. It rose up in gracious towers that hurt the eye with their slenderness and precision. It was a monument to wealth and beauty. Back in its day, at least, it would have been a monument to wealth and beauty. In the present, it was a castle that had been killed. Many of its white and shining towers had crumbled and fallen down in miserable chunks. Jungling overgrowth rose from the sea and wrapped around the base of the building, both green slimes and thick vines. Its gardens were gray, filmy canopies of dead trees and plants. They had overtaken the windows, the balconies, the balustrades, and clung there and died. They covered much of the frontage in a secretive mist of expired matter. Gold veins shone dully in the dirty white walls. The docking bay must have also been elegant in its era, a huge landing swath that could have held 100 ships at a time. Now, 92 of the cradles were desolate and filthy. The metal was caked with salt from the water, salt that now assaulted Gideon's nose, a thick, briny scent, overpowering and wild. The whole place had the look of a picked-at body. But hot damn, what a beautiful corpse. The dock was alive with movement. 5 other ships had landed and were expelling their contents. But there was no time for that. Someone had come to meet them.
So this was kind of the slide I picked to make the argument that, hey, this is Earth and these are, but we already kind of did that. So, but yeah, I mean, I love just to talk about the writing here a bit. We already kind of talked about ossified, but like, of course, a society of necromancers would describe everything in reference to death and corpses. Right. And so I love the way the text describes this building, like that idea of the whole place had the look of a picked at body, but hot damn, what a beautiful corpse. Like it's just, she's so consistent in that everything is seen through the lens of a person that is dealing with death and that kind of thing all the time.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't think we're gonna get a better chance. So I want to mention that Harrow Hark has been puppeting the corpses of her parents for several years, which is just such a, I don't even know what word to use for that. Like that's incredibly dark.
It's so dark. It's so dark, but like it's introduced to us in a kind of a funny way, right? Like
yeah, it's a Weekend at Bernie's or whatever type of. Like I think that's the thing is the book is dealing with themes of death through and through. And yet this character is just kind of this kind of jackass, and thus she doesn't take anything seriously, and so we're sort of kept from feeling a lot of that until the book is ready for you to feel it. Like when characters that you actually care about die, then it matters, and then it's horrible. Like she can turn on the horrifying when she wants to.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting because I think it's a society in which death means something different than it does, for us, for a lot of obvious reasons. And so I think Gideon has been exposed, like just the idea that you grew up around a person that can make skeletons, like make an entire skeleton out of like a skeleton pinky, and you're seeing like the skeletal remains of people constantly. You're seeing the remains of life around you constantly, but that doesn't necessarily mean you understand what death is.
Right.
And it's such a really interesting thing. Like Gideon's response to death is really, really powerful in this book. Like when people start dying, her reaction to that is like big. Like it's not like a lot of the other houses are kind of, they don't react to it. They don't, or at least they're hiding their true reaction so much it doesn't seem like they react to it. But it just seems like to Gideon, it's not something that she can just deal with.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm just realizing, like, I played a necromancer character in a video game in EverQuest for a long time, and it almost never occurred to me that I was doing like death magic. But what's funny is I did like 85% of the things that the characters in this book do. Like
Hmm.
I could like siphon life from people and summon a skeleton from a pile of bone chips, and um, a variety of similar things involving like transfer of life energy
Yeah.
and manipulating people's blood and stuff like this. And you just kind of disconnect it because it's just like that's just how the world works, and you forget that. Like I think that's a fun idea that death has been something that has become so routine that she doesn't even think about it until, oh, like Magnus is dead. This is super
Yeah.
sad actually.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. I love that it seems like Tamsyn Tamsyn. Am I saying her name right? Tamsyn Muir.
I think so.
She took she's like, all right, necromancer, like whether it's the video game necromancer, the D&D concept of necromancer, or just general necromancy in fiction. And she
Mm,
said, okay, what would that actually look like? Let's really break that down. And she doesn't
mm,
like Sandersonize it really, I mean, there are clearly rules to the magic, but they're very broadly explained. But it's just really interesting. Like she takes it and says, "What would that look like on an emotional level? Like, what would it do to a group of people that where this is just commonplace?"
yeah, this is how the world works. This is the metaphysics.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the interesting thing is there's no other magic, as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
There's not wizards over here who do elemental magic. It's like no, there's one kind of magic, and it's necromancy. No, that's a grim universe. Um, and like you have this emperor who is a 10,000-year-old lich of some kind. I mean we do eventually meet him, but I think for most of the book I was assuming that the emperor was going to be like the Warhammer 40K emperor, where he was like some kind of nightmare creature
Yeah.
actually.
I agree with
Um,
you. There seems to be no other kind of magic in this world, but we do have a big thing hanging over this whole thing, which is like, who is Gideon, right?
mhm.
Who obviously Gideon is someone more important than we know at this point.
Yeah, yeah,
So
right. I
I
feel like that's a thing that's going to be reserved for sequels, right?
sure, yeah. All right, let's talk about the introductory prayer as they get ready to start their contest. Once everyone was awkwardly perched on the exquisite wrecks of furniture, finishing their tea, clutching their cups with the gaucherie of people who didn't know where to put them, making zero conversation, Salt and Pepper Plate raised their pale voice and said, "Now let us pray for the Lord of that which was destroyed, remembering the abundance of his pity, his power, and his love." Gideon and Harrow were silent during the ensuing chant. Let the King undying, ransomer of death, scourge of death, vindicator of death, look upon the 9 houses and hear their thanks. Let the whole of everywhere entrust themselves to him. Let those across the river pledge beyond the tomb to the adept divine, the first among necromancers. Thanks be to the ninefold resurrection. Thanks be to the Lictor divinely ordained. He is emperor, and he became god. He is god, and he became emperor. Gideon had never heard this one. There was only one prayer in the ninth. All of the services were call and speaks or knucklebone orison. Most of the crowd rattled it off as if though they'd been saying it from the cradle, but not all. The hulking mass of man meat, Protesilaus. Am I saying that? I suck with it. How do you pronounce it, Matt?
For disallow us, yeah.
Protesilaus stared straight ahead without even mouthing the words, his lips as still and pale as the third twin's. Cause he's dead. The others joined in without hesitation, though with varying fervor. Once the last word had sunk into silence, Teacher said, "And perhaps the devout of the locked tomb will favor us with their intercession." Everyone's heads twisted their way. Gideon froze. It was the Reverend Daughter who maintained complete equanimity as she dropped her cup into Gideon's hands, and before a sea of faces, some curious, some bored, and one, Dulcinea's enthusiastic, Harrow began, "I pray the tomb is shut forever. I pray the rock is never rolled away." Gideon had known on some basic level that the religion practiced in the dark depths of Drearbur was not quite the religion practiced by the other houses. It was still a shock to the system to have it confirmed. By the expressions on some of their faces, bewildered or blank or long-suffering or, in at least one case, openly hostile, the others hadn't been confronted with it either. By the time Harrow had finished, the 3 priests looked softly delighted. Just as it always was, sighed the little bent priest in ecstasy, despite the wretched dirge. Continuity is a marvelous thing, said Salt and Pepper Plate, proving themselves insanely tedious.
I just love everything about it. I love how the scene is constructed because we heard the prayer before back on her planet, and we know that it's like in context of understanding. Like so, people clarified this for me a little bit ago when I was reading about this. Basically, the Emperor is Christ,
But
and
but this is reverse Christianity.
what?
I pray the tomb is shut forever. I pray the rock has never rolled away.
Well,
This is the resurrection.
that's why the rest of them consider the ninth house to be an oddity,
Mm-hmm.
because the rest of them are basically Christians who are following their, the. I mean, perhaps he's literally supposed to be the resurrection.
Yeah.
Like, and then the ninth house is like, no, it would be better if he didn't. And it's just such a interesting
Yeah.
idea. Um,
Yeah, I mean, literally, like you look at their prayer: ransomer of death, scourge of death, vindicator of death. Like that's like the whole thing with Christ is that by being resurrected, he conquered death for everyone, right? Not
mhm,
just for himself, but if he
mhm.
conquered death for everyone. Like that's the entire thing with the afterlife, and he did it by by the rock being rolled away, by the tomb being open, and the rock being rolled away from the tomb. These are the most important, impactful events in all of Christianity,
Uh-huh.
and here these two characters are like, no, no, let's not do that. Kyle saying, you think there might be some Catholicism in this book? Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Big time.
Yeah, probably more than I've detected, honestly.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Uh,
I mean, yeah, it's such a like, what an interesting thing to do, right? Like, because I mean, just imagine the prayer that everyone else is saying is a prayer to Jesus Christ.
yeah, and then you have somebody say this. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
you would be some combination of like awed and upset.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, just I mean, so okay, just here, Gideon is basically not saying anything, right?
Yeah.
Which is she's going to continue to not say anything for a lot of the book, and I think that's such a fun thing to do with this character, where we've spent enough time with her to know that she is a highly disagreeable smart aleck, and yet the fact that she doesn't talk, it just leads everyone else to project their assumptions of what a ninth house cavalier is supposed to be like onto
Yeah.
her.
Yeah.
And it's so fun. I enjoy I mean, this is just one example, but there's many examples where like it's almost like people are bending over backwards around her without her even having to do anything or say anything, just because they kind of paint the picture of who they think she is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is played for sort of a gag when she finally speaks, actually. Um, but
Totally.
yeah, I love that element of this,
I do
of
too.
how this is done.
I also love that, like, because Gideon doesn't speak very much, the narrative voice, like, sometimes just becomes her voice. Like at the very end of this one, like,
Hmm.
sighed the little bent priest in ecstasy despite the wretched dirge.
Yeah,
Said the Salt and Pepper Plate, proving themselves insanely tedious. Like, that's just Gideon. Like, that's
yeah,
just Gideon's voice there, but speaking through the narration. And I think it's really good. It's really good.
yeah. I love that too.
All right. Are you ready?
Yeah, we have the contest begins. Gideon and Harrow team up to work on one of the challenges below, but things shift when the Necro and Cav of the fifth house are found dead. Gideon was thinking about nothing in particular when they left number 1-2. Transference/winnowing data center. Except that she was happy, buzzed with adrenaline and anticipation. She'd eaten a good meal, she'd won the game, the world seemed less maliciously unfriendly. She and Harrow left in companionable silence, both swaggering a little, though newly conscious of the cold and the dark. They hurried along the corridors, Harrow Hark leading, Gideon following half a step behind. There was nobody but them to trigger the motion sensors, and the lamps popped to life in rhythmic wunk, wunk, wunk. They lit the way through the central room with the bronchial passages, more of that biology,
Everything.
and then down the short corridor to the access hatch ladder. At the beginning of that hall, Harrowhark stopped so abruptly that Gideon bumped into her in a flurry of robes and sword. She had gone absolutely still and did not push back against her cavalier's stumble. For the first moment, following Harrow's line of sight to the foot of the ladder, Gideon disbelieved her eyes. Her brain in an instant supplied all the information that her guts didn't want to conceive, and then it was her, stuck, frozen, as Harrow sprinted to kneel alongside the tangle of wet laundry at the bottom of the ladder. It wasn't wet laundry. It was two people, so gruesomely entangled in each other's broken limbs that they looked like they had died embracing. They hadn't, of course. It was just the way their back-to-front limbs had arranged themselves in an untidy death. Hot bile rose in her mouth and made her tongue sticky. Her gaze drew away from the blood and exposed bone and fixed inanely on the empty wet scabbard by one busted wet hip. Nearby was the sword, fallen point down in the flooring grill. The green lighting underfoot made its ivory steel glow a sickly lime. Gideon's necromancer stonily flopped the top corpse to the side, exposing what remained of both faces, before rising to stand. She'd known before Harrow had rolled him over that before them lay the sad, crumpled corpse of Magnus Quinn, jumbled up with the sad, crumpled corpse of Abigail Pent.
Rest in peace, Mr. Magnus Quinn.
Yep.
Dad Crowmancer.
Yeah, everybody loved him.
He's such a
They were
dad.
going to bring everybody together. It was going to be great.
It's going to be great.
All the necromancers and the cavaliers were going to get along, and it was going to be a party, and they were going to do their research and figure out how to become lictors, and somebody didn't want that to happen.
Yeah. Well, also, I'm just imagining them finding out. I'm just imagining Magnus and Abigail finding out what is necessary to become lictors, and then just like, ooh.
I mean, I think you get the sense that if they had found that out, they would have just not done it.
Yeah.
It was meant to be voluntary, but.
And Tringard catches on exactly why I pulled this slide in particular, because this is when the book makes a pretty decisive shift, right? You can see the way the author was setting up the Agatha Christie of it all, but it is really not until this moment that we like flip the switch and move into that kind of story, because suddenly we're here and there's dead bodies now, and now we're in a whodunit. And like any other whodunit, that while they're investigating the dead bodies, more dead bodies keep showing up, and then cryptic messages are written on the walls, and all these things. Just really, really fun stuff, I think.
Yeah, and the priests say there's a monster, and there's the element that all of the servants are skeletons, but they're like unusually good skeletons, which is unnerving to everyone. Yeah, I love that. I love all these elements. Like just the like that specific element is one where it's like, I never would have thought of that. That's so great.
Yeah, and we didn't pull a slide on it, but I love the kind of the part where everyone's. I think it's obviously after this moment, but I think it's a little further into the story as well, where the remaining necros and calves are kind of meeting, and teachers there, and they're kind of talking about what all this stuff means, and teachers like, and I think they're arguing about what the rules of law are in this area, and I think the soldiers of the second are kind of like, we're taking over command here because people have died now and we need to do our investigate, blah blah blah. And like teachers like, there's only one rule here, and that's that you have to ask me permission before you go in the door. And like there's this very real shift in tone where like every single necromancer realizes that A, it's a competition, and B, they can do whatever they want. And you just realize where everyone's just goes like, oh fuck, people are just gonna start killing each other like crazy. And that is, I mean, it's not necessarily exactly what happens, because there's a force that they don't know about slowly taking them off, but there is this real shift, like where like at the beginning of the book, there's a duel at the very beginning between Gideon and a couple of the other calves, and it's such like a fun, like they're playing it for like the exercise that it is, and like a challenge of which is the better house, right? It has no meaning outside of just kind of, puffing your chest and showing your peacock feathers type of thing. And there's such a wonderful shift from that kind of fun, unserious type of dueling to where things go as people fully realize the depth of the competition.
Yeah, because most of these people are not murderers, despite the fact that they're surrounded by death all the time. And so the cavalier role is sort of this ceremonial, person who's supposed to defend your honor. but not necessarily have to like defend your life with a broadsword. That's why they have rapiers. I don't know why I said it that way, rapiers.
Rapiers.
Rapiers. But yeah, it's I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
The tonal shift into like realizing that they're all trapped here. Like the shuttles disappear, they're trapped here. They have to figure out what's going on. Something's hunting them. Yeah, it's so fun. So fun.
Can we? Because you brought up the rapiers, I just love like there's this constant push and pull at the beginning where Gideon thinks it's so stupid to use a rapier. It doesn't make any sense as a weapon. This dumb, and the reveal that yep, you're exactly right. The only reason they have these weapons is because they're the only things that the necromancers would be able to wield when they have to stab their calves in the heart.
Right.
It's really
Yeah.
really fun. That's
Well,
really fun.
the thing that I thought was hilarious about the rapiers from almost the beginning is what is the one type of weapon that is most ineffective against undead in every fantasy role-playing context?
Piercing.
Piercing.
Yeah.
And that's all they have. And I was like, I was like, oh my god! Like I immediately had that thought. I was like, wait, you're taking away her two-hander to give her a piercing weapon when you know that this is a world of necromancers,
Mm-hmm.
and and of course it is textually, like you just said, not for that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So it's like there's a lot of commitment. That's what I mean about, to get back to why reread would be so beneficial is because there's a lot of detail hidden in this book. There's a lot of it. And that's what I mean when I said I did a bad job reading this book is because I just missed so much of it. So much of it. All right, let's talk about Dulcinea a bit, and some of the foreshadowing that this book is really laying on thick here. So this scene is when Dulcinea has teamed up with both Harrow and Gideon for one of the key challenges. They need to do a kind of soul siphoning in order to get power to walk through this field, and Dulcinea is observing Gideon suffer from this. "No," said Dulcinea. "Oh, no, 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 stay awake." Gideon couldn't say anything but blurk, mainly because blood was coming up enthusiastically out of every hole in her face. Then, all of a sudden, it wasn't, drying up, parching, leaving her a waterless and arid tongue. The pain moved down to her heart and massaged it, electrifying her left arm and her left fingers, her left leg and her left toes. It was beyond pain. It was a gigantic straw. In her dimming vision, she saw Harrowhark walking away, no longer haloed by fragments, but limned with a great yellow light that flickered and ate at her heels and her shoulders. Tears filled Gideon's eyes unbidden, and then they gummed away. It all blurred gray and gold, then just gray. "Oh, Gideon," someone was saying. "You poor baby." The pain went down her right leg, and to her right toes, and then up to her spine in zigzags. She dry heaved. There was still that pressure, the pressure of Harrow, and the sense that if she pushed at it, if she just went and fucking knocked at it, it would go away. She was sorely tempted. Gideon was in the type of pain where consciousness just disappeared and only the animal remained, bucking, yelping an idiot yelp, butting and bleeding. Throw Harrowhark off, or slip into sleep, anything for release. If there had been any sense that she had to try and hold on to the connection, she would have lost it already. Gideon was just overwhelmed with how badly she wanted to shove against it, not huddling in a corner and scream. Was she screaming? Oh shit, she was screaming. "It's all right," someone was saying over the noise. "You're all right. Gideon, you're so young. Don't give yourself away. Do you know? It's not worth it. None of this is worth it at all. It's cruel. It's so cruel. You are so young and vital and alive. Gideon, you're all right. Remember this, and don't let anyone do it to you ever again. I'm sorry. We take so much. I'm so sorry." She would remember each word later, loud and clear. So, on retrospect, this is very obvious. It's very obvious what's going on here. Because it's Dulcinea saying this, who is actually a lictor and who
Yeah.
is explaining this is how it's going to work, and it's terrible.
Yeah. It's yeah. Right. It's because as we're seeing, all the challenges are the pieces of the ritual that make the lictor. Yeah.
Yep. And this is, I think, I wanted to kind of use this slide to talk about that a little bit. I think we can talk about Harrow and Gideon's relationship a little bit here too, but mostly I wanted to talk about Dulcinea and her relationship perhaps with Harrow, and the seeds we're leaving here. Of course, For those of you that read a lot of literature, Dulcinea is the name of the woman that Cervantes makes up in Don Quixote. So that's actually really obvious if you know that what they're doing here.
That's funny.
It's really clever, actually. It's a not real woman that Cervantes makes up. So
That's fun.
yeah,
Yeah, the other thing I like about this is that you have yet another situation where Gideon, who claims to hate Harrowhark, just loathes her, but she willingly lets her put her through this horrific torture, and keeps herself from pushing the magical suction away, even though she easily could, because
yeah.
it would be at the cost of Harrow's life, and so she almost dies herself so that Harrow can do this exercise.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow manages to not have any kind of introspection about this fact. My
Yeah,
favorite kind of protagonist.
it's so wonderful how she's just completely not aware that like like there's moments like when she first sees Harrow's body wrapped in bone under the laboratory, she's like, oh man, I despite earlier in the day saying she'd be celebrating the death of her
Mhm.
necromancer, she rushes over there. It's really great.
Miss Evil Doom says Dulcinea's Cavalier Protesilaus
I thought you were
is
just avoiding pronouncing his name, and then
no,
you did.
I was trying to decide if I was going to try to say Cytherea or Dulcinea, both of which are challenges. Protesilaus is the first man to die in the Iliad. Which
Oh, that's good. I didn't get that
know.
one. I got the Don Quixote one, but I did not get that one.
It's great. He's the first to die.
Miss Evil Doom says, I also love that Harrow is nude 2 pages after this, and Gideon just stares at her face without face paint. Yeah, it's like the first time she's seen her face, right? Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
there's like there's a deep love going on there, and
Yeah.
and both characters are just completely ignorant of it.
Yeah, no, I thought that was a really beautiful scene where it's like she describes Harrow as if it's the first time she's ever seen her, because
Mhm.
it is indeed the first time she's seen her without face paint, and kind of realizing that like there's a human under the black robes and the makeup and all that.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Harrow does not make it easy for her to realize this stuff. That's for sure.
that's true. And they do torture each other. Um, that was one thing that I maybe wish we had more context on, is like what are the sorts of things that they actually did to each other. Like even like 2 or 3 sentences just kind of listing off like the horrible tortures they had done to each other in the past would have given me context, because I'm like, are these like impish little pranks, or is this like, did she try to poison Gideon, right?
Yeah,
And you're never really sure what the level of intensity was.
I know what you mean. I don't know. I felt like seeing Harrow's response to Gideon saying "I'm sorry" when she learns the truth about her,
Hmm.
like, and her reaction to that. Like, I think that's all I needed in that
Hmm.
regard. Like, I don't think I needed the specificity of that. I just understood that like it's almost she was never going to actually kill her because
Hmm.
that just wasn't what she was going to do. But like she was going to make her wish she was dead and then deny her that death.
Hmm. Right. Yeah, I think I mean, we do get everything we need ultimately. It's just it was more toward the beginning of the book where I was having a hard time putting my finger on like, is this more like a sibling rivalry where, I mean, my daughters sometimes say they hate each other, but
I think it's more than that. Yeah, for sure.
but like whenever one of them is in danger, the other one flips out, you know. So it's more than that, but like, what does that mean? Like what exactly? And I'm not really asking. I'm just saying like I had trouble putting it in a cubby in my brain of like what level of hate are we talking about? As
Sure.
you say, it eventually is kind of answered, and I think it's actually meant to be a mystery or something that you're meant to wonder about and worry at, and so
Sure.
not that much of a complaint.
Stillhex also points out that some of the stuff that they did talk about what was done, possibly was actually not done by Harrow, but was actually done by Crux,
Hmm.
which would make sense.
Sure, that didn't occur to me.
All right, you want to
Cool.
move on
Yeah.
to another sad death?
Yeah. Here we have another sad death. The ninth doesn't do big families. I think I'm an orphan. Sorry, let me contextualize this
Yes,
first.
yes, please.
This is Gideon teams up with the teens of the fourth house to go looking for the missing cab of the seventh. The fourth cab loses their necro and best friend, and the two hide out. The ninth doesn't do big families. I think I'm an orphan. Well, that's pretty fourth house too, said the cab. My mum jumped on a grenade during the Pioneer expedition, even though she wasn't supposed to be out on post-colony planets beyond the rim. Isaac's dad went out on a state visit to a hold planet and got blown up by insurgents. There was no more after that, not even tears. After a few minutes, Gideon was not surprised to see that the poor bloodied girl had cried herself unconscious. She did not wake her. There would be time enough to wake her, and even a short rest would probably do her good. It sucked to be a teen, and it sucked more to be a teen whose best friend had just died in a horrible way, even if he were used to mothers jumping on grenades and fathers getting exploded. At least in the ninth house, the way you usually went was pneumonia exacerbated by senility. Gideon rested her head on the fat back of the armchair. She would not have said it was at all possible, but watching the rise and fall of Jin Mary's breath, a safe up and down rhythm, the drying tear stains on the sleeping teen's cheeks, she promptly fell asleep. It couldn't have been long, 15 minutes at the very most. She startled awake with the sheer unconscious panic of someone realizing they couldn't afford to sleep into deep REM, a haptic jerk flicking her awake. Her sword rattled off her knees and jangled on the floor. The only sound that could have woken her was a persistent drip she thought was coming from the tap. Gideon did not understand what she was looking at when she awoke, and when she cleared her eyes and looked properly, she still didn't understand. Jean Marie was still lying prone in the old bed, arms and legs now flung wide, as if she had kicked off the blankets and sheets in a bad dream. This would have been fine, except for the huge shafts of bone spearing each shoulder to the mattress, 2 more through the thighs, 1 straight through the very center of her ribs. These spears of bone met Jean Marie's heart with halos of red, splotching her clothes, seeping into the bedspread. No, said Gideon meditatively. No, 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 no. Jean Marie's eyes were very slightly open. There was blood splattered in her curls, and there was blood spattered over the headboard. Gideon's gaze followed the spatter upward. Written on the wall in silky wet red was, "Sweet dreams."
Dun dun dun. What an act break.
What an act break. What a horrible thing.
Yeah, it's really sad. I mean, I wanted to have a slide where we talk about the teens because I think talking about the fourth house is really interesting. And the thing I liked about this particular section is we get a little bit of flavor about who the fourth are and how sad that is that they're just this, like, I think they were kind of described by the book as like the Russian foolishly house, and that kind of seems weird, like jump on grenades, sacrifice yourself, like people dying all the time type of thing, and then so we get that, and then we also get her death here. And I don't know, I think it's really interesting how Gideon interacts with these teens, because as people have said in chat, these are the first like children, quote unquote, she's ever seen in her life, because the only other child she saw was Harrow, who was a year younger than her. And I think it's funny how she treats them. I think the book calls this out at one time, that she's treating them like little children, even though they're like four years younger than her. Not like she's not too much older than them anyway, but one, Gideon has had to kind of grow up very fast, and they haven't necessarily done so. And two, she's just like so unused to children. It's like it's like like if you've never interacted with like an 8-year-old anymore, you might treat an 8-year-old just like you would treat a 2-year-old, because you just don't know.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of how she treats these teens.
That's a good analogy. Or you could say like somebody who hasn't really spent a lot of time around dogs, just kind of not being quite sure how to deal with them. And it doesn't help that she spends a lot of time not talking.
Yeah, that's true.
She can't really directly get to know them until later.
But of course, in the classic Gideon moment, she immediately blames this death on herself. It's her fault because she fell asleep. As if she would have been able to stop it had she not fallen asleep.
Right.
Which is great, because I think this is before the reveal of where Gideon's like, I didn't pull the slide on it, but the moments are like, Gideon's like, now I have to tell you my terrible secret and why Harrow hates me. I killed her parents. And you're like, what? And then she tells a story, and it's like, I told on Harrow, and then they killed themselves. And you're just like, you think that's like what?
Yeah.
You didn't kill them. What are you talking about? That's not your fault. But that's
Right.
just kind of who Gideon is. I think she's constantly searching for a reason why everyone hates her.
Yeah.
And her the way she does that is always internalize it. Like there has to be a reason why these people hate me, and it has to be my fault. And therefore she's like desperately searching. She's actually desperately searching for a reason, a meaning behind that, and she internalizes that meaning. It can't be they're an asshole, they're jerks. It's I did something wrong. What did I do? This is all my fault.
Right. Or she misses out on the fact that they don't even hate her. They're terrified of her, actually.
Yeah.
In fact, you could say no one hates her. I mean, maybe Crux hates her, but like everyone else is either indifferent or terrified of her, or I mean her sword master actually seemed to love her, actually.
Yeah, I think that's the only like healthy relationship she had in her entire life.
I thought it was a really beautiful moment when she realizes this is probably the last time she's going to see her, and like for the first time it occurs to her that this is sad and that she's going to miss her.
Yeah.
But then of course she kind of turns it into a joke of a moment. I liked it. So here's a stupid question at this point. Everything was Cytherea, Dulcinea, right?
Yes.
Like this was Dulcinea, Magnus, and his wife. I can only remember Magnus because it's a memorable name. Sorry, it's like the only name I remember. Abigail. Was anything not Cytherea?
Good question. I don't think so. Well, I mean, I guess she's not responsible for what happened to the second, right?
You mean is that the cohort folks who get killed trying to send a message?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think she's responsible for that. I think that was just the soul golem that was teacher.
Yeah. So she's not responsible for their death, but I think everything else, because she kills Magnus and Abigail. The two burnt up bodies they find in the cremation thing are
Protessalawis,
and the real
the real Dulcinea.
Dulcinea, yeah.
And then everything else is just a big mess. I can't remember everybody's name, so it's hard for me to talk about.
Ianthe, is that how you say it? The
Ianthe, she kills her.
Ianthe kills the eighth, which we're gonna actually get to here pretty soon.
And her own cavalier. I guess does her sister just survive?
Well, that's interesting because we left her sister crying about how I didn't pull a slide, but that's such a good moment. We're like, obviously Gideon has the hots for Corona, so she like rushes to her to comfort her in the sad moment of, oh my god, my cavalier's dead and my sister turned into this crazy thing. And what she's really crying about is that she wasn't the one picked, which actually I think is a great transition to this part right here, where I wanted to use to kind of talk about the members of the third. So let's read the slide and then we can talk about it.
All right.
If I never fought Niberius again, I'd be happy, she said. He's a prick. Corona laughed in a hard, light trill. Then she said smilingly, you might have to, eventually. But I don't mean him. She lunged. Gideon drew, because despite her brain's long, droning white noise, her nervous system was still full of adrenaline. She slipped her hand into her gauntlet and was cautious when she met Corona's shiny third blade with her own. Was surprised at the force behind the blow, at the manic energy in the other girl's eyes. Gideon pushed down, forcing Corona's blade aside, and Corona moved with her, sliding her blade down with the pressure, her footwork taking her into a beautiful disengage. She pressed, and it was only a hasty parry on Gideon's part that kept the princess at bay. Corona was breathing hard. For a moment, Gideon thought that this was the necromancer's weakness coming to bear, the lungs already sagging under the strain. But she realized that Corona was excited, and also very nervous. It was like the queenly, confident Corona of old, masked over badly damaged stuffing. This lasted just a moment. She gave a sudden purple, furtive look over Gideon's shoulder, stiffening and retreating backward, and there was an indraw of breath from the doorway. Drop it, barked Niberius' turn. Not fucking likely, thought Gideon, but he skirted far around her reach, lunging past her to curl a hand hard around Corona's forearm. His eyes were bugged out with alarm. He was in his undershirt, with his collection of rangy and sinuous muscles all brought to bear on his princess. She sagged mutinously, like a child caught fist deep in the lollies jar, and he was putting his arm around her. You can't, he was saying, and Gideon realized he was also terrifically afraid. You can't. Corona made a giving up sound of incoherent, fruitless rage, muffled by Niberius's arm. It was, thankfully, not tears. She said something that Gideon missed, and Niberius said in reply, I won't tell her. You can't do this, doll, not now. For the second time of the day, Gideon drifted away from a scenario she was utterly shut out of, something she did not want to be privy to. So, okay. There's a lot to talk about here in the relationship between these three people of this house. But I think a good place to start is that last line, where it's just so funny that the book does this so often, where there's like a thing that is actually extremely important to the plot is happening, and Gideon doesn't want to be involved in it, so she just leaves, because you, the reader, are sitting here like, what the fuck what's going on? What's going on with this house? Like, if you're paying enough attention, you can probably get to the conclusion of Corona's not actually a necromancer, because she shouldn't be able to be that strong if she was one. But like, Gideon's just like, I can't deal with this shit right now, I'm out, and just leaves it.
Right. I think I can't remember if I put that together at this point or not. I don't think I put it together completely, but it's definitely, I think you're definitely meant to become suspicious that, like, why would she, if she's supposed to be the one who's the better one, she's better at everything, why would she know how to sword fight at all? And the answer is, well, they probably taught her to sword fight to defend herself, because she's not a necromancer. I don't know. It's funny. I can't remember what I put together when, because honestly, I blitzed through this book pretty fast because I was enjoying it so much that I think I may have skipped, not skipped, but missed some things. Yeah. Anyway, that's cool.
Yeah. And like, the thing that's so funny is you're so uncertain. Like, it's so good that Corona's been this like light, like happy, like beautiful. Like, Gideon is kind of completely obsessed with her, like, at least just from a looks kind of way. Like, she's in love with this beautiful woman. Like, every time we describe Corona, like, she is the sun. And it's it's really interesting that, like, she, like, the complex relationship here that you don't kind of fucking see, because Gideon is only interested in, like, how beautiful she is, and like she's like obsessed with the beauty of Corona and just hates Niberius because he's a prick, as she says here. And then, like, Ianthe is like not even a consideration.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a whole theme of people misapprehending each other.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so she kind of falls in love with Corona for her looks, and doesn't realize that, like, she's just totally misunderstanding who this person is. She kind of falls in love with Dulcinea in like a gothic romance fashion of like, she's pining for this woman who is dying, and it's so romantic in this tragic way. And she's also kind of in a very complicated way in love with Harrow, who she also totally misunderstands.
Yeah.
And then simultaneously, most people misunderstand her, at least at first, especially when she's not talking.
Yeah.
And then of course, and then just everything is just like assumptions based on a combination of like appearances and like romantic. Wouldn't it be cool if this person was this person who I want them to be? Thinking.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing at Miss Evil Doom's Dulcinea is dying of consumption, but in a hot way.
Yeah. Oh no.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're right, and I think it's interesting. Like, there is a read that you could say, like, Harrow hates Dulcinea, and is completely untrustworthy of her, and it ends up she's right, but like, I don't think she's motivated by, I suspect she's actually the one behind all this thing. It's just like, Gideon keeps giving her attention, and Harrow does not like it.
Yeah, she's jealous and gets super mad when that's implied to be happening. Yeah,
Quantum and Stelhex are both saying that, like, if Gideon is such a neglected person that anyone that shows her any kind of positive attention, she like immediately falls in love with.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And the love distorts her perceptions. Is,
Yes.
I think,
Yeah.
part of it.
And to circle back around to you saying like, why does she know sword fighting? I think she wants to be a Cav. Like I think Corona wants to be a Cav, and her family was like, no, you can't. We need you to pretend to be the Necro. And so like she's just like she's not getting to live the life she wants, and that's part of the reason why she's so betrayed when Ianthe picks her actual Cav over Corona, because that's what she wanted.
Right. In her mind, maybe she is the Cav, and what's his face? Naberius is just there to kind of be there for the sake of appearances.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure. Does she kill Naberius because she doesn't want to murder her sister, or does she kill Naberius because she thinks that he'll be stronger and a better soul?
Wait, no, Ianthe kills Naberius.
That's what I meant.
Oh, does she pick him? I think she picks him because to her that's the Cav, and I don't think she likes her sister very much.
Yeah,
I don't think she likes her. I don't think she has any respect for her sister. I think she sees her sister as just window dressing.
Yeah, she's just
to
weak,
herself. Yeah,
she has to take care of her and cover for her.
Yeah.
Never get the credit. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
A shitty relationship. There's a lot of really shitty relationships in this book. I mean, like the Cav Necro relationship is the core of what this book is, and through the other houses we get to see all the ways in which these relationships are terrible and toxic and awful, which allows Gideon and Harrow finding finally a positive relationship. That's what allows that to be so impactful.
Yeah, right. It's almost like they realize that their relationship isn't so bad after seeing all these other people.
Yeah. Speaking of their relationship, we need to move to the pool scene, Matt.
Right, here's the pool scene. Now, Harrow takes Gideon into a pool to reveal her secrets in salt water. She could have asked Harrow anything. She could have asked about the bomb that had taken out Ortis Ninigad's life instead of hers. Or she could have asked about her whole entire existence, why it had happened, and for what reason. Instead, she found herself asking, what do you know about the condition or pathogen that bumped off all the kids? The one that happened when I was little, before you were born? The silence was terrible. It lasted for such a long time that she wondered if Harrow had slightly drowned herself in the interim, until... It didn't happen before I was born, said the other girl, sounding very unlike herself. Or at least that's not precise enough. It happened before I was even conceived. That's unwholesomely specific. It's important. My mother needed to carry a child to term, and that child needed to be a necromancer, to fill the role of true heir to the locked tomb. But as necromancers themselves, they found the process doubly difficult. We hardly had access to the fetal care technology that the other houses do. She had tried and failed already. She was getting old. She had one chance, and she couldn't afford chance. Gideon said, you can't just control whether or not you're carrying a necro. Yes, you can, said Harrow, if you have the resources and are willing to pay the price of using them. The hairs on the back of Gideon's neck rose wetly. Harrow, he said slowly, by resources, are you saying 200 children, said Harrow Hark tiredly, from the ages of 6 weeks to 18 years. They needed to all die, more or less simultaneously, for it to work. My great-aunts measured out the organophosphates for after weeks of mathematics. Our house pumped them through the cooling system. From somewhere beneath the pool, a filter made blurting noises as it recycled the spill-off. Harrow said, the infants alone generated enough energy to take out the entire planet. Babies always do, for some reason. Gideon couldn't hear this. She held her knees to her chest and let herself go under, just for a moment. The water sluiced over her head and through her hair. Her ears roared, then popped. When she pushed above the surface again, the noise of her heartbeat thumping through her skull was like an explosion.
So obviously we couldn't put this whole scene in a slide because that would be the longest slide ever. But everything in the scene is really wonderful. As people in chat are already pointing out, this is a baptism of sorts. They're, revealing their sins and washing themselves clean from the sins, which really fits all the Christian imagery we're already putting into this book. I I this is, I think, the point for me when I was like, okay, I'm finally feeling this book. I'm finally really starting to like it. I think this is really powerful. Just this idea that, like, what would it be like to be a person, to live your life knowing that 200 children died to make
Hmm.
you alive, to make, like talk about earn this, right? Talk about the pressure and
Yeah.
the grief and the responsibility that places on you.
Right. It's like she kind of metabolized it the only way she could, which was to
Mm-hmm.
decide like I have to be great.
Mm-hmm.
I have to be the most amazing, greatest necromancer ever to deserve this, because the alternative is just to be like, I don't deserve this. This is horrible. I'm a monstrosity and I shouldn't exist. Um, uh,
I think it's really interesting too when, like, the reason they did this is because the ninth house, like, desperately needed an heir that was a necromancer to fulfill their true purpose. But then we kind of learn later that, as the rest of the houses understand it, their purpose was to go to to Pluto, bring the locked tomb with them, lock the door with them inside it, and die,
uh,
so it could never be opened again. And they just, as far as we know, they just went, nah, we're not gonna do that. We like being alive. So it's really interesting that from, like, a lore perspective, their great purpose as a house and as a necromancer is not has been accomplished, and, like, their line dying out would actually be fulfilling what the rest of the houses see as their responsibility.
yeah, that is interesting. It's like I guess you could say there's a minor sub theme of the idea of people taking doctrine and interpreting it in whatever way makes it convenient for them, because
Yeah.
that happens a little bit in
Yeah.
the various houses. The various houses all kind of have their own, you know, extreme interpretations or beliefs or priorities,
Yeah.
which it's all in theory taken from the same sort of corpus, because we're not even talking about something like sects of some religion which just exists in a book. Like the emperor is a dude who flies around in a spaceship, um,
Uh-huh.
and conceivably could just be like, hey, ninth house, why are you still here?
Yeah.
Um, but I guess he doesn't for some reason. I don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know much about him.
Yeah. It's you're right. It's really interesting. Like, presumably, like, it's been what, 10,000 years
Yeah,
since that was all supposed to go down,
right.
and they're just like, yeah, it's cool. We're just fine with you existing for 10,000 years for whatever reason. Yeah.
Yeah,
And this is, I mean, like, we learn tons of stuff here, right? We learn Gideon was supposed to die with the rest of the babies and didn't for some weird unknown reason that we still don't really know. We learn that Harrow has unlocked the locked tomb and found some eldritch abomination down there, and also a little girl, which again is just kind of, I think, laying seeds for future books. Like, we don't know where to put that at all, other
yeah,
than, okay.
yeah. Right. That's true. Um, I'm just trying to think through the idea that like the the
Yeah.
the emperor had something so terrible that he ordered that it be sent to Pluto, the far edge of the solar system, and locked away, and then ideally have everyone who locked it like bury themselves in under it, so that
Yeah.
that it would be totally buried and forgotten.
It's
And
probably just Mary Magdalene, because we can't. Jesus isn't allowed to be married, so that's probably what it is.
there you go. He would die if he were happy or something like that. It's goth Jesus.
Goth
Because he
Jesus.
has, doesn't he have like black sclera?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Goth
perfect.
Jesus on his magical death spaceship. It's wonderful. Yeah, I found the scene incredibly touching. As other people have already pointed out, the scene where Gideon goes to hug her and Harrow just assumes she's about to be drowned. Harrow calls herself a war criminal. She snaps at Gideon for having the audacity of, like, apologizing and feeling pity for her and sympathy for her. It's like, I no, I wanted to just, I hate you. I hated you. I wanted to destroy you. I blamed you. You were the symbol of everything that was done in my name. It's really powerful and wonderful.
Yeah, right. I think the thing about these two characters, like the reason why they fundamentally are people who care for each other is like this. They're both the victim of the same horrible thing,
Yeah.
actually,
Yeah.
and they didn't know how to deal with it. They didn't even understand what the horrible thing was. They didn't understand what the trauma was that had been inflicted on them.
Yeah.
And so they lashed out, and they lashed out at each other, but also they're kind of all each other has to hang on to. And
Yeah. A lot of this
yeah,
book is about agency and choice and the ability to choose for yourself versus, other people acting upon their choices for you. Like we haven't really talked about the eighth yet, but I love the complex relationship between the Cav and the Necro of the eighth and how awful it is. I think that's what's on the next slide actually. So
okay, all right,
let's move over to there and then we can talk about this more.
right.
So this I kind of jumped ahead a bit, but the eighth goes up against Dianthe of the third, who has figured out how to become a lictor. In order to beat her, he soul siphons from his Cav, but he does it too much, and some other thing gets in the body. So let's read this, and then we'll talk about it. Column the Eighth's eyes were as liquid black as, before, Ianthe's had been liquid white. He had stopped moving as a human body did. The warrior's economy of movement, the long and lovely lines of someone who had trained with the sword his whole life. The swift-footedness was gone. He now moved like there were 6 people inside him, and none of those 6 people had ever been inside a human being before. He sniffed. He craned his head around, and kept craning. With an awful crack, his head turned 180 degrees to look impassively at the room behind him. One of the light bulbs screamed, exploded, died in a shower of sparks. The air was very cold. Gideon's breath came out as frosty white frills in the sudden darkness, and the remaining light struggled to pierce the gloom. Colum licked his lips with a gray tongue. Particles of bone bounced along the floor. Harrow Hark had thrown them in a long, overhand arc, and they fell true at Colum's feet. Spikes erupted from the ground, crowding Colum between them, locking him in tight. Colum raised his white-booted foot indifferently and kicked through them. They exploded into dusty, tooth-colored clouds of calcium. Silas looked up, nearly fetal, from the floor. He still glowed like a pearl in a sunbeam, but he'd lost his focus. Ianthe stepped out of his spell disdainfully, flesh plumping, color coming back to her face, and she itched herself. There were lights beneath Colum the Eighth's skin. Things pushed and slithered along his muscles as he walked, heavy-footed, rocking from side to side. Silas wiped the blood away from his nose and mouth and said calmly, "Brother Ashe, listen to the words of the head of your house." Colum advanced. "Come back," said Silas, unruffled. "I bid you return. I bid you return. Colum, I bid you return. I bid you return. I bid you return. I bid. Colum." The thing that lived in Colum raised Colum's sword and drove the point through Silas Octacissarin's throat.
Didn't work. So this is yet another one of those things where I was never entirely clear on whether this was this just like the massive spiritual energy that's bouncing around this house and all of the undead servants, or was this something that Cytherea stepped in and did?
I don't think Cytherea did. I think this is just the natural result of the kind of soul siphoning that the Eighth does. There was always this risk of you pull the person's soul out to feed upon it, and you open yourself up to other things finding that place and taking it, and it's horrifying and awful. And I mean, this is like we're talking about, as with everything, we're talking about like the agency of people, and Colum is a man who was literally bred for this, right? Like the way the Eighth does it is they raise a cavalier to be like blood aligned with the Necro to make this process as efficient as possible. His job is to stand there and have his soul sucked out, and then, well, don't worry, well he'll learn how to get back. And we've already seen in the book through Gideon that this process is not like, oh, it's just chilling, and then I'm just gonna float around for a while, and then I'll find my way back later. It is the most painful, horrible experience ever. It's awful, and he just has to do it all the time, every time. And anytime Colum shows any agency in the book, he's immediately rebuked by his Necro. I think the part where Silas invites her to like a peaceful like information session, and then at the end of the session is like, "I'm going to take your keys now, Colum, attack." And he's like, I gave him my word. I staked my honor on this. And he's like, don't worry about it. And he's like, he's this poor man
Hmm.
has no agency, and the one moment he tries to push back, it's just so sad. It's so sad.
Yeah, yeah, I love that scene because it's like he's accepted that he can be stepped on in everything and used up, but he somehow he told himself that he had this one thing which was his honor.
Yeah, he had his
Like,
one line that he would not cross.
yeah,
Yeah,
like you can have my body, you can do whatever, you can kill me if you need to, but even my honor, you won't let me have that.
yeah,
And it's just it's the bridge too far. I don't know if I can directly connect it with this scene, but it does seem like like after that point their relationship is harmed. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is you could argue that the reason why they lose this fight could even be that their sort of alignment has been broken by the
yeah.
fact that they don't really trust each other at this moment.
And as Dan is saying, perhaps Colum just said, "I'm not coming back this time." Like
Yeah.
he literally, as his necro is sucking the life from him once again, he's like, "Please don't do this.
Hmm.
Please don't do this." Like he's
Yeah.
begging him to not do it, and he does it anyway because that's just what he does. And so yeah, if I'm Colum, I'm like, "Fuck off. I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm out later."
The eighth is such a fascinating house because he's the most clearly, I mean, Octokizaran specifically, because he's the most overtly hostile to the ninth, but also his type of magic is like the least moral.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like uh, pointing the finger so that nobody can point the finger at him type of thing.
Yeah, yeah. I love what people are saying in chat. I mean, Miss Evil Doom points out the quote, which is just perfect. My honor is the only thing I have. Everything else is yours,
Mhm.
which is perfect. I love the. I don't remember what the exact quote was. It's something like, "You'll need my sword to do that," and his response is just, "I have your sword." Like it's just this. It's so it's infuriating. You just
Yeah,
feel so bad for this guy.
I like how Quantum points out that this basically became um, cosmic horror
Mm-hmm.
here,
Mm-hmm.
um, which
Yeah.
I wonder how literally to take the idea that his body's full of souls that had never been people before. It's like, are these like literally alien souls? I don't know. That might be too far, but um, it's it it's it's very creepy, right? It's
Yeah.
very very exorcist creepy.
I didn't pull the part where his eyes become mouths. I just didn't feel like that was necessary to read out loud. It is extremely horrifying and cool, though.
Uh, yeah, gosh, yeah, I do need to reread this because I just kind of like forgotten so many of these great moments.
Yeah. All right. Let's go to our big reveal, Matt.
All right, big reveal. Dulcinea is not Dulcinea, but rather Etheria, one of the Emperor's lictors. You should have listened more closely, but I never ever lied. I am from the seventh house, and it was an accident. Anyway, she and I talked. She was a sweet little thing. I really had wanted to do something for her, and afterward I kept her for the longest time until someone took out my cavalier. Then I had to get rid of her quickly. Furnace was the only option. Don't look at me like that. I'm not a monster. Septimus was dead before the shuttle landed at Canaan. She hardly suffered. There was a very long pause. Palam- Palamedes' voice betrayed nothing when he said, "Well, that's something at least. I suppose we're all to follow now." "Yes, but this wasn't really about any of you," said the woman in the room with him. "Not personally. I knew that if I ruined his lictor plans, killed the heirs and the cavaliers to all the other 8 houses, I'd draw him back to the system. But I had to do it in a subtle enough way that he wouldn't bring the remaining hands with him. If I had arrived in full force, he'd have turned up on a war footing and sent the lictors to do their dirty work like always. This way he's lulled into a false sense of semi-security, I suppose, and he won't even bother coming within Dominicus's domain. He'll sit out there beyond the system, trying to find out what's happening, right where I need him to be. I'll give the King Undying, the Necrolord Prime, the Resurrector, my Lord and Master, front row seats as I shatter his houses one by one, and find out how many of them it takes before he breaks and crosses over, before he sees what will come when I call. And then I won't have to do anything. It will be too late. A pause. Why would one of the Emperor's lictors hate him? Hate him? The voice of the girl whom Gideon had known as Dulcinea rose, high and intent. Hate him? I have loved that man for 10,000 years. We all loved him, every one of us. We worshipped him like a king, like a god, like a brother. Her voice dropped, and she sounded very normal and very old. I don't know why I'm telling you this. You who have been alive for less than a heartbeat, when I have lived past the time when life loses meaning. Thank your lucky stars that none of you became lictor, Palamedes Sextus. It is neither life nor death. It's something in between, and nobody should ever ask you to embrace it. Not even him. Especially not him.
More like Judas the Seventh, am I right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Yeah, I mean the lictors are basically you could call them the apostles.
There's not the right number of them, but that's okay.
Do we know how many lictors there are? Are there 8 lictors?
Actually, I mean, I assumed there were 8. I assumed there was one per house.
It's weirdly unclear how many lictors there are, because sometimes it seems like there might be more, and sometimes it seems like there might be only a handful. Kind of like Balrogs. You're never really sure. Is there like?
It's exactly like Balrogs.
It's because in the Silmarillion there's like armies of Balrogs, but then in other places it's like, no, Balrogs are super dangerous. There's only like a handful. So, the chat says there's 7 or 8.
Yeah, 7 is a very holy number, so 7 would make sense. Yeah. So I guess how did this reveal work on you? Did you like this? Did you find this like a satisfying big reveal?
I mean, so I suspected Dulcinea, but I was still satisfied to learn that she's one of the lictors. I guess I wish I knew what why she's doing this, you know. But other than that, yes, I found it kind of sad.
Cool. I mean, did you feel like her motive here? Because basically, we learned her motive here is that, like Dulcinea, she was dying of a similar thing, right? Of a blood cancer, I guess is what they said, and like becoming a lictor just kind of put her in the state of constant dying. Like she's just sick for eternity, and so over 10,000 years, she just fucking started to resent this shit.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, one interesting thing is the fact that she's constantly coughing up blood is not a put on.
Yeah.
Like that's actually how Cytherea has lived her last 10,000 years.
So it's like you get to live for eternity, but you're in late stage cancer for eternity. Hooray!
Yeah. It's so I mean, I guess the motive is just like she broke eventually.
Yeah. Miss Doom says she's Deadpooling. Yeah. That's perfect. Yeah. I like it. I mean, it's interesting. Like, I think we're gonna spend some more time examining, like, at least in the frame of this book, she's the bad guy, right? She's the villain that did all this stuff and killed all these people, and like our main character agree to become the hand of the Emperor at the end of this thing. But I think we're going to learn a lot more about this Jesus dude, the space Jesus dude. So
before we leave this slide, I think one of my favorite moments from this conversation is, like, I always liked Palamedes. I thought he was a great character because he's just very like practical, and human. Probably the most grounded and human of all of the necromancers, and him and his cav have a non-horribly toxic relationship, and he's having this like quiet, restrained conversation with Cytherea, and I just love the moment where she's like, "You're being very reasonable about all this," and he's like, "I've been killing you slowly throughout this entire conversation."
That's really wonderful.
Turning your cancer into super cancer.
Yeah.
And then he like turns himself into an explosion of magic just to try to make it even worse.
And it doesn't work. It's so sad.
It does. Yeah, it doesn't work, but he does. I think, he does successfully give her the super cancer, which is then used to kill her. So
yes, correct. Yeah. Cool guy. We haven't talked about Camilla like at all, but I really like her as well. His Cav. You're right. That is like the one seemingly healthy Cav Necro relationship, because like
Mhm.
he's like, I love when he says, I would never do that to Camilla, and she's like so gleeful. Oh, so you figured out how it worked.
Mhm.
Um, I would never do that to her. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, it's great.
Palamedes is just a guy, and I love him for it. That's great, Avery.
Yeah.
All right. So this is a big moment that we're about to read here. Our big moment where Cytherea summons a giant construct to fight them, and we build to this glorious moment of both Harrow and Gideon kind of coming together, literally and metaphorically. From the hole emerged one long, overjointed leg, then another, and another, a fretwork of bones, a net, a lace of them, long stingers of teeth, a nesting body, a construct so big that it turned one's bowels into an icebox. The hulking construct that had killed Isaac Tataris filled the room behind its mistress, stretching itself out and expanding, pulverizing a wall and a staircase as it emerged. Its great bone head lolled and loomed above them, mask-like, with its hideous molded lips and squinted shut eyes. But now this benighted vision stood before its natural predator, the reverend daughter of the ninth house. And yet more skeletons jerked and clambered upward from their fallen comrades, Gideon got up, dusted herself off, and found Harrow standing in a pool of osseous dust and facing the construct with a hot-eyed, half-delighted anticipation. Without even thinking about it, her body moved to take her rightful place in front of her necromancer, sword held ready. This is the thing that killed Isaac, said Gideon urgently. The enormous construct was still trying to wriggle one leg free from the floor, which would have been funny if it hadn't been so terrible. Sextus? Dead. Harrow's mouth briefly ruckled. A necromancer alone can't bring that down, Griddle. That's regenerating bone. I'm not running, Harrow. Of course we're not running, said Harrow Hark disdainfully. I said a necromancer alone. I have you. We'll bring hell. Harrow, Dulcinea's a lictor, a real one. Then we're all dead, Nav, but let's bring hell first, said Harrow. Gideon looked over her shoulder at her and caught the reverend daughter's smile. There was blood sweat coming out of her left ear, but her smile was long and sweet and beautiful. Gideon found herself smiling back so hard her mouth hurt. Her adept said, I'll keep it off you. Nav, show them what the ninth house does. Gideon lifted her sword. The construct worked itself free of its last confines of masonry and rotten wood and heaved before them, flexing itself like a butterfly. We do bones, motherfucker, she said. I tried to say it with a straight face. I couldn't.
It's such a great moment. I had such a big smile when this came around.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh shit.
I love that. The part I love most of it, like without even thinking about it, her body moved to take her rightful place in front of her necromancer. I think like it's really interesting because throughout the book, Gideon describes Harrow as her necromancer. She does, like, this is not the first time she described her as that, but I feel like there was always like a tinge of sarcasm to it. This is to me like feels like the first time she says it and like means it.
Yeah. This is them for real, having sort of shown each other what they actually think and feel inside, and
Mm-hmm.
It's fairly short-lived, unfortunately.
Yeah, and Bipolar on is pointing out the part. Did he say anything before he died? He said he loved you. What? No. That was so good. Just kidding. He said you'd know what to do.
Yeah. What?
The humor in this is so good. It really is. It's very funny.
Yeah, it's well, and that's the thing, is it's well balanced because there's a lot of emotional stuff that happens, and it has to be weighed with the humor, but I think it does so successfully. I mean, I think even the very sad ending that we're about to get to, I think is like it ends up with that sort of humor that's really very rare and very hard to nail, where it's like, yeah, this is still super sad despite the fact that you're like smile crying as the book ends, you know?
Yeah.
It's really tricky. I wouldn't even know how to begin to do that, but it hits it really well.
So let's talk about this. The next slide is Gideon, of course, making her sacrificial choice here. So
all right,
let's talk about it.
Here we go. Okay, she said. I understand now. I really, truly, absolutely understand. Harrowhark had leant back on her elbows and was watching her, black eyes lightless and soft. Nav, he said, the gentlest she had ever heard Harrow manage. I can't hold this for much longer. Wham! 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 I don't know how you're holding it now, said Gideon, and she backed up, looked at what she was backing toward, looked back at her necromancer. She sucked in a wobbly breath. Harrow was looking at her with a classic expression of faint nonagesimus pity, as though Gideon had finally lost her intellectual faculties and might wet herself at any moment. Camilla watched her with an expression that showed nothing at all. Camilla the Sixth was no idiot. He said, Harrow, I can't keep my promise because the entire point of me is you. You get that, right? That's what Cavaliers sign up for. There is no me without you. One flesh, one end. A shade of exhausted suspicion flickered over her necromancer's face. Nav, she said, what are you doing? The cruelest thing anyone has ever done to you in your whole life, believe me, said Gideon. You'll know what to do, and if you don't do it, what I'm about to do will be no use to anyone. Gideon turned and squinted, gauged the angle. She judged the distance. It would have been the worst thing in the world to look back, so she didn't. She mentally found herself, all of a sudden, in front of the doors of Dreerbur, 4 years old again, and screaming, and all her fear and hate of them went away. Dreerbur was empty. There was no crux. There were no god-awful great aunts. There was no restless corpse. There were no restless corpses, no strangers in coffins, no dead parents. Instead, she was Dreerbur. She was Gideon Nav, and Nav was a Niner name. She took the whole putrid, quiet, filth-strewed madness of the place, and she opened her doors to it. Her hands were not shaking anymore. Wham! 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 The structure bowed and creaked. Big chunks were falling away now, letting in wide splotches of sunlight. She felt movement behind her, but she was faster. For the ninth, said Gideon, and she fell forward, right onto the iron spikes.
So sometimes I think about wanting to study like how fiction writing has changed since movies existed, because like this is such a cinematic scene, and
Yeah.
I feel like only a person who watches movies could write something like this, and it's so fascinating to me. You can probably see this very distinct shift in novels as you get to a point where movies are so mainstream that everyone's watching them, and so they influence every writer's ability to picture a scene. I think that'd be a really fascinating thing to study.
Yeah, that's a good point, because there's no explicit camera, obviously, but knowing where Gideon is looking and not looking gives us a sense of what we would be seeing or not seeing,
Yeah.
and the visuals of the scene, and the I mean, I think that the repeating refrain of the wham 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 is actually cinematic too, because it's
Yeah.
reminding you of the sound cue that's going to be mixed in
Yep.
over this conversation.
Yep. Yeah. So to talk about this, I want to talk about a movie, ironically. I want to talk about Mad Max Fury Road for a sec. So spoilers for Mad Max Fury Road if you haven't seen that somehow. Apologies. In that movie, there's a character named Nux who is one of the war boys whose entire purpose in life is basically to sacrifice himself, right? To die. And that's when you get to go to Valhalla, and he's like brainwashed by Immortan Joe to think that this is his only purpose in life is to do this thing, and that's all life means is to sacrifice yourself for the good of Immortan Joe, and then you get to go to Valhalla and live happily forever. And at the end of that movie, he sacrifices himself, but he sacrifices himself for something that means something to him, for his own choice. The final line of that movie, his final line of the movie is "Witness me," which is the refrain they all say when they sacrifice himself. But he's doing it for something else, for something that means something personally to him, and that's kind of what is happening here, right? It's still a person giving up their autonomy basically for another person, but unlike every other instance of it we've seen in this book so far, Gideon is making the choice. Gideon is doing it herself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really powerful. That's really important.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, Avery in the chat has been making some observations about the fact that there's a theme, particularly with Gideon's character, but I would say also with the whole idea of the Lictorhood and the Cavaliers, of people having their personal autonomy taken away, their control over their lives, their control over their bodies being stripped from them. And as you say here, despite the fact that Gideon is killing herself, she's doing it by her own will. Yeah, that's what allows this, I think, to be sort of a bittersweet ending.
Yeah, and the flip side of this is, of course, what Avery is saying, which is that, like, does Gideon even recognize the fact that she is a whole ass human person who has the ability to exist outside of this commandment, kind of?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, she's so sort of traumatized and mistreated that she probably doesn't, honestly. Like,
Yeah.
she's never even seen what normal looks like.
Sure.
So no, I doubt that she does.
Yeah, and as John is pointing out, this is a kind of communion, a kind of Last Supper thing where, yeah, and then Harrow not literally eats her, but does consume her.
And there's also this is maybe more of a stretch since it doesn't quite add up actually, but it's not a trinity, but it is a dyad,
mm-hmm.
where you have two souls in one.
Mm-hmm. Just gotta wait for that Holy Spirit, baby.
Kind of makes me wonder if the Emperor isn't 3 in 1 somehow. That would be
sure.
Interesting.
That would be interesting.
Interesting idea. She does have a drop of her blood. This is my blood. This is my body. Yeah.
Yeah. The blood of the everlasting covenant.
Yeah, which will be given up for you.
Do this in memory of me.
Ding.
You can tell that Matt and I have been to Mass a lot.
Yeah. Her juice. Yes, her juice.
What a moment. Okay. I think... I don't know where I land on this, because I think Avery makes a good point that there is something absolutely tragic about this thing, that Gideon is this person who, like, maybe for the first time in her life is realizing her own autonomy and agency, and then immediately through circumstances is kind of pushed into a situation where she has to choose to give it up.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a tragedy. Like, the book's sad. It's a sad ending.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, it feels like a powerful culmination of this character. I don't really know exactly what I'm saying. Like, I'm not arguing. I guess Gideon does fully make this choice.
Yeah.
Of her own volition. It's just horrible and sad that she has to make this choice.
Yeah. I guess what I'm saying is, should I feel as good about this choice as I felt about Nux's choice at the end of Mad Max Fury Road? Beautiful moment of this poor kid finally doing something that meant something.
Yeah. Well, that was also a kind of catharsis, because he started out the movie as an antagonist.
Yeah.
And that was a redemption for him, whereas Gideon doesn't really have anything to redeem from. She is
True.
Just this poor girl who
True.
Is treated like crap and then kills herself.
I mean, what it really makes me do is get really excited for whatever the next book has in store. Which by the way, calling the book Harrow the Ninth is such an interesting choice, right? Because as I'm jumping ahead to our final slide, let's read the final slide and then we'll have this conversation.
Okay.
The Emperor leaned back in his chair as they looked down at each other. He had a ridiculously ordinary face, long jaw, high forehead, hair a dull and leaden brown. But those eyes. He said, "I know you became a lictor under duress." "Some may call it duress," said Harrow. "You aren't the first," said the Emperor, "but listen to me. I will do what I haven't done in 10,000 years and renew your house." "How did he know about that?" "I'll safeguard the Ninth. I will make sure what happened at Canaan House never happens again. But I want you to come with me. You can learn to be my hand. The Empire can gain another saint, and the Empire needs another saint more than ever. I have 3 teachers for you, and a whole universe for you to hold on to, for just a little while longer." The King Undying had asked her to follow him. All she wanted was to be alone and weep. "Or you can go back home again," he said. "I have not assumed you'll agree with me. I will not force you or buy you. I will keep covenant with your house, whether you come with me or stay at home." Harrow said, "We can't go home again." There was a vague reflection of her in the window, interrupted by distant space fields pocketed thick with stars. She turned away. If she saw herself in a mirror, she might fight herself. If she saw herself in a mirror, she might find a trace of Gideon Nav. Or worse, she might not find anything. She might find nothing at all. So the universe was ending. Good. At least if she failed here, she would no longer have to be beholden to anyone. Harrow touched her cheek, and was surprising to find her fingertips came away wet, and that the Necrolord Prime had chivalrously lowered his gaze. She said, "I will have to go back, eventually." "I know," said the Emperor. "I need to find out what happened to my cavalier's body. I need to know what happened to the others." "Of course." "But for now," said Harrow, "I will be your lictor, Lord, if you will have me." The Emperor said, "Then rise, Harrowhark the First."
It's great. It surprised me, honestly. It surprised me that Gideon died, and then we ended with Harrowhark. But
Yeah, and I mean, as I was kind of talking about before, like the idea that the next book is called Harrow the Ninth, when like this book ends with her being called Harrow the First,
right,
which is really delicious because it means like how is that going to tie into like the dynamic of and the what Harrow is going to carry from this event forward is really interesting. This is a person who already feels guilty about the death of 200 children. Now she just hit 201.
right, and now she has that soul like literally living inside her, which it's one of those things where knowing how stories work and tropes and the milieu that we're in, it's like, okay, but so she like has Gideon's soul.
Mm-hmm.
So isn't that sort of at least some kind of avenue that she could potentially become obsessed with either bring her back or become obsessed with the idea of bringing her back, which might be, to my mind, a more interesting character direction.
Yeah, I'm really interested in how that's gonna play out because I don't know, because we saw in Ianthe that like there was fighting going on there, right? There was
Right.
like he was still in there somewhere. But this is a different relationship, a different kind of. So I don't know what it's gonna look like. I'm really interested in it though.
Right. I mean, we saw that Gideon seems to, in some form, be inside her, able to like help her sword fight. Right. So.
Right. Like there's like the moment that happens from then, it's like she's there helping her and then fades away eventually as she kind of assumes her rightful place as just a soul inside her. But I don't know.
Yeah. My interpretation, which was something that I probably need to. This is one of the many reasons I need to reread, is like she sort of hears Gideon telling her what to do and showing her what to do.
Yeah.
And then at some point Gideon's like, in any way, this is just like a voice you're conjuring up to to deal with the fact that you just went through something really traumatic.
Yeah.
And then like you said, the voice goes away.
Well, and then obviously the big what if is there's something different about Gideon, right? Mm-hmm. Gideon survived.
Right.
When no one else should have. And so what does that mean for Gideon's soul inside that? Like this is going to be a different kind of thing.
And anyway, Gideon's a ginger. So.
Yeah, that's important. Who was the one that said that? Was it
I don't remember.
Dulcinea when she took the hood off for the first time and she's like, oh.
Seems like a Dulcinea thing to say, but
yeah.
it might have been one of the teens. I don't remember.
There's so many little breadcrumbs for what is to come. I mean, like Gideon's backstory is to like just deliciously set up to be your standard fantasy character backstory, but we leave this book with her dead, which is dead, which is the most interesting thing. Like, I really thought like as they were setting up the stuff, like she opens a piece of parcel and like has the name Gideon written on it, and I was like, oh, we're gonna like discover her hidden backstory. And then she's like, and then as I realized where we were going, that this has to end with her being a lictor, I was like, how the fuck are we gonna do this? And I don't know the answer yet.
Yeah. Just on the idea of like the mechanics of a story in a world full of necromancers, where when you think necromancer, the first thing you think is, oh, you can bring people back from the dead.
Sure, yeah.
And I was remembering how much I loved. I think one of the, I mean, I love the book pretty much from the start, but I think one of the moments that kind of really pulled me in deeper was after they find the bodies of the first two victims, and all the necromancers are like gathered around, and they're all trying their own form of necromancer magic to bring the bodies back.
Yeah.
They're trying to call for the souls. They're trying to they're all going to like a further extremity than they really like they know it's not working, but it's sort of like the scene where the character's doing CPR and they can't. They're like he's gone, he's gone, and it's like it's that scene, but with their necromantic magic, and it really showed like how none of them are actually used to losing people.
Yeah.
And not that and people, and also it shows like people can die, like even a necromancer can just die and now they're dead, they're not coming back. So
Yeah.
I think that was actually important to establish in a story that's full of necromancers, honestly.
I agree. One thing, so this is going to be, I found it weird. Obviously, this is a book written by an LGBTQ author. It's about characters that are LGBTQ, but I thought the marketing on the cover was really, like, really forceful about this. It's like lesbian necromancers explore a haunted gothic palace in space. Like on both the front and the backward, it's like lesbian necromancers. And I don't know, just like, yes, she is, but like, I don't know. It felt.
Well, Gideon's not a necromancer, so.
Yeah, that's I'm a, but I don't know. I just felt weird to me that like I thought this book was like beautiful in just how like they didn't treat anyone's sexuality as like a thing. It was just that's just who they are. Like, it was just like like there's never a moment where Gideon says I'm gay or anything. Like, it's just a thing. It's just a thing. It's just part of who they are, and that's how she wrote it. And I thought that was wonderful and beautiful. And then I read the cover, and like both the front and the back cover, it's like lesbian necromancers in space, blue. And it's just like, I didn't like it. And I'm not blaming the author because she has like no say in how any of that stuff is done. Like, especially an author. I think this is maybe not her first book, but one of her early novels. So like you just have no say in how any of that stuff goes.
Right. Yeah. I think just necromancers in space is already pretty evocative. Although maybe they tried that, like maybe they scoped it out and they were like, oh, so this is a Chronicles of Riddick sequel. And then people were like, okay, what can we add to this to make it not a Chronicles of Riddick sequel?
Yeah.
Just add the word lesbians, and then your mind never goes anywhere near.
Yeah. I mean, I recognize this is a weird thing for me, a straight man, to be complaining about, but I don't know. It just felt a little weird to me.
Yeah, it's that's how advertising works.
Yeah, I know. That's the world of marketing.
Yeah. Right. Like you said, I like that all of these elements were just very human and matter of fact in the story itself. Yeah. And I actually kept waiting for it to become like a more central part of the story because it was so prominent in the advertising material.
Yeah.
And it's very understated actually in the story.
I also happen to see, this is a total tangent, but I was looking at this book on Goodreads, and I happen to see someone on Goodreads said, so I know this is like an LGBTQ book, but is it like too much? And the author herself responded to the comment. She's like, well, I'm LGBTQ, and the characters are, I don't know what you mean by too much. It's just very fun. Like, yeah. I think you post that kind of shit on Goodreads, never expecting the author herself to like pop in and be like, this is a weird question to ask.
That's, I mean, I want to go, to some, Jane Austen book and be like, so I heard this is like a straight book, but is it like too much?
Yeah.
What? What are you talking about?
Like, how much straightness is actually in this book? Because it's so ridiculous.
Yeah.
Okay, that was a fun time. Any other questions or comments from you folks? Like, I started the episode trying to work my way into an apology that I never actually made, which was I don't think I did the best job pulling slides this time around because I had such a hard time. Like, if I had read the book a second time, I'm sure all the slides would have been brilliant. They would have been perfect. But I appreciated the conversation. I think we did this book justice.
Yeah. I like I said, I mean, I don't know if I owe an apology per se, but like just because I blitzed through it because I was enjoying it so much, certain things weren't clear to me, certain things I didn't remember very well, made it much harder for me to talk about. And I mean, I think we sorted a lot of it out. That's why I asked some of these stupid questions.
Mhm.
I assume that other people had these questions too, so I probably didn't waste everyone's time too badly.
Mhm.
Um, but I think I am going to reread this actually. It's one of those things where it's just so damn enjoyable.
Yeah. The
Um,
only thing I'm trying to decide is whether I'm going to reread it before or after reading Harrow the Ninth, because I think I'm definitely going to be reading the next one.
yeah, awesome.
Miss Evil Doom says, I thought the slides were pretty good, mostly because I did a better job guessing at what they would be than Avery or Mike did. Well, yeah, just pat yourself on the back there. That's great. So yeah, I guess that answers John's question. Yes, I 100% am going to read Harrow the Ninth. I don't know when I'm going to get around to it. My to be read list is a mile long, but I definitely am going to be reading it for sure.
Awesome.
Lictor Jane Austen throws off her disguise and parades. No, I didn't catch a Mean Girls reference. There's so many references in this I did not catch. Like, so many.
Yeah. I mean, even this last page where she says, "We can't go home again," I'm like, I think that's a quote from something, but I'm not sure what.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty sure there's the sentence "We can't go home again" is a famous sentence from some book. I don't know. Or it's
Probably.
a song maybe. Anyway.
Isaac says if you wait a while between reading Gideon and Harrow, I strongly recommend reading Gideon first. Okay. That makes sense, I think.
Yeah, I'll probably just like immediately reread Gideon.
Oh, see, I laughed at that line, John, but I forgot that was a Mean Girl reference. Yeah. What was the original quote? It's
What are we talking about?
oh my God, Harry, you can't just ask people why they want to be a lictor. Yeah,
Okay.
that is from Mean Girls. I don't remember what the original Mean Girls quote is. That's good.
Okay.
That's good.
Okay. Sure.
What else do we got? So next month we're reading Harrow the Ninth. Just kidding.
Just kidding.
Next month's book is our biannual. Wait, does biannual mean twice a year or every 2 years?
I think maybe semi-annual is. I don't know.
I hate words.
I think I've looked this up and it's like you can use it either way, and I'm like, what?
You can't just ask someone why they're white. Is the Mean Girls quote? Yeah, that's very good.
Biannual means occurring twice a year. Yes.
But okay, so how do you say every 2 years? What is the word for that?
How do you say every other year?
Does it say biannual? I bet you it does.
Biennial.
Oh, biennial.
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 I didn't even know those were two different words until this exact moment
word.
at this 36th year of my human life. So,
how do you say twice a week? Is it bi-weekly?
I think biweekly is the other one that means both, but
I hate this shit. Also biannual. Our language is terrible. It's the worst language.
At least now I know that by whatever. Anyway, you were saying.
I was saying that every 6 months, Matt and I take the democratic process away from our listeners and declare ourselves emperors undying. And this time around, it was Matt's turn to pick a book, and Matt has picked. What'd you pick, Matt?
I picked Ancillary Justice because I think it was on the slate last time around for voting, and it looked really intriguing to me. Apparently, it won both the Hugo and Nebula awards.
It won so many awards, yeah.
That's one of those signs that this is a book worth reading.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's relatively new, and it sounded interesting from the synopsis, and just kind of, it wouldn't be me if it wasn't a science fiction pick.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a no-brainer, really.
It's apparently assured, gripping, and stylish, says this book.
Awesome. I like that. I like those things.
So yeah, I'm really excited about this one too. This is one that I've been looking forward to reading as well. So we're gonna be doing that next month. Well, this month actually, because it's already October. We're finally back to our last Friday of the month schedule. We got off for like 1 month, and then it takes like 3 months to adjust to that. But we're back. So Friday, October 29th at 9:30 p.m. Central Time, we will be meeting to discuss Ancillary Justice. If you have anything you want to say about this book to kind of like help us steer the conversation, you can always reach out to us at doofmedia@gmail.com. Leave us a message. Just put October Book Club in the subject line so we know what you're talking about, and we can bring it up when we're on the show. Or you can just save it and be here live, right? Because you should be here live. If you're listening to this after the fact, if you're listening to the audio only version of this or just watching the YouTube the next day or something, why weren't you here? Does it have something to do with time zones? Well, I'm sorry, that we can't do anything about that. But if it's just because you didn't feel like it, get off your butt and then get back on your butt to sit in front of your computer and watch us talk about a book for 2 hours.
Yeah, get on your butt, people.
Get on your butt. That's the new phrase.
Love it.
Any lesbians, John asks. It doesn't say on the cover, so how are we supposed to know if there are any lesbians in the book? That's a really great question. I don't know.
Point. Yeah. It's just assured, stylish, and gripping. Those are the three things that it is.
If I don't see anything assured in this book, I'm going to be very upset.
Yeah. I mean, there's no swords or necromancers or skeletons on this cover, so I'm already not sure if I'm going to like it.
Dan says he's listening at work. Are you on your butt, Dan? Are you on your butt? Is everyone on their butts?
As long as you're on your butt.
All right, folks. We're going to end this for now. Thanks again for those of you that tuned in live. For those of you that successfully got on your butt, thank you so much.
Yeah, if you like what we do here at Doof Media and you want to see more of it, then please head on over to our Patreon at patreon.com/doofmedia and consider donating to support our organization. At any available level on the Patreon, you'll get access to the vote for the books that we talk about each month, except for next month, as well as a bunch of other exclusive features. So go check that out.
That is right. And of course, once again, if you have any questions or comments or just want to reach out to us, you can reach us at doofmedia@gmail.com, on our Twitter account @doofmedia, Instagram @doofmedia, and our subreddit, which is r/, what is it? Doofmedia.
Oh, okay.
All right, folks, that's going to do it for this month. Thank you once again, and we will see you next month for some justice, but only in an ancillary variety.
Yeah.
We'll see you next month. Whew. How do I unrecord things? Do you know?
I don't know. No, I don't know anything.
Thanks, folks. That was fun. I had a good time. I came into this book honestly, I came into this worried because I knew I had heard those of you saying how much you like this book, and I was worried that we wouldn't do it justice and disappoint you folks, but I thought it turned out pretty good. And that's a lot thanks to you guys, for peppering in comments and stuff as we went. So thank you so much.
Yeah, there were a few slides in there where I was like, oh, I just now realized that I don't understand what happened in this scene.
Yeah.
So
isn't it fun? Isn't it fun how reading something out loud makes you go like, I get it now. Why didn't I?
Right. There's a lot of stuff where I had been like, all right, I'm sure that this mystery will be explained later. And it's not that it wouldn't be, it's that I still wouldn't fully understand it even after it had been explained.
Yeah.
So this was a good conversation. I feel a lot more secure in my understanding of this book now.
Yeah. Folks, make sure you tune in tomorrow because Doof Media will be back live right here tomorrow for Game Club, where Ruben and Elliot will be talking about, what was the game again? Crypt of the Necrodancer, that one. Have they announced the other thing yet, Matt? Do you know? Let me check the website. I'm about to say something that I don't know if I'm supposed to say yet. Let me check the website.
I don't know.
Oh, they did. They did. Okay.
Okay.
So Ruben and Elliot are very busy right now, as you folks probably know, because Pale is coming to an end, and they are getting ready for their I can't believe they're doing it again, 24-hour live stream. So they are going to be, Pale is going to probably end here pretty soon, and they're going to be busy working on that next month. So they were going to cancel Game Club, but before they canceled Game Club, they made the mistake of going to our group chat and saying, hey, we're going to cancel Game Club unless any of you want to do it next month. And Matt and I have this thing where we can't say no to things. So we said, yeah, sure, we'll do it. We have time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
Matt and I
sure.
are going to be hosting Game Club next month. It's going to be a little bit different because I just picked a game that I had been wanting to play. It's a relatively short game. It's a game called The Forgotten City. They're going to all be announcing this tomorrow too. I might be stealing their thunder, but sorry guys. But it's like a 5-hour game called The Forgotten City that I heard was very, very good, and I've been wanting to play it, and I thought it'd be fun to kind of do that with a game club thing. So Matt and I will be doing book club and game club next month. And so I hope you guys attend Game Club tomorrow and then try out. If you've never tried out Game Club before, I think Forgotten City is a good game for it if you're here right now because it is a much more story-driven type of game. So if you like books, you might like that video game. So that's all I had to say about that.
Awesome.
I'm glad they announced it.
Can't wait to play that game.
Yeah, and we're going to be streaming our playing it throughout the month. We haven't worked out when exactly we're going to do that yet, but we're gonna do it. It's part of the requirements of being part of a game club is to stream it. So
Sounds good.
I think that's it. And it's on sale on Steam right now. Matt, we should go ahead and buy it. It's on sale right now, so just go ahead and buy it.
Okay. Going on to Steam right now.
All right. I think we're gonna say bye-bye. Oh yeah, it's a 25-hour live stream. Of course, they had to outdo themselves by an hour.
Yeah, they wouldn't sink to the level of doing a mere 24-hour live stream.
Yeah. I hope you guys are looking forward to that too, because Ruben and Elliot have been kind of sharing in snippets the stuff that they have planned, and it's gonna be really fun. All right. Let's say goodbye because I want to go to bed. It's midnight.
Yes, me too.
All right, folks.
That was fun.
That was
All right,
very fun.
everybody.
Thank you so much, and we
Bye.
will catch you next month. Bye.